Chapter 25:33. Heirin laughed. He looked at the young man who had suffered a loss and looked a little angry, and his smile became a little wider. He felt that being able to fight with such a person was indeed a very good experience. Although the fight just now was very short, it was enough for them to find too many problems and some similarities. This was not a mysterious statement. A person's fighting style and handling of some details would expose many problems, such as a person's mind and temperament. You are indeed very good. Can you tell me which tribe you are from? Heirin asked. Now, Heirin was indeed very interested. After all, it was a great loss for the Blackwater tribe to miss such a great opportunity. Of course, he still felt that it was to his liking. It was not easy to find a friend with a similar temperament. Therefore, he did not care much about the opportunity behind him. In Heirin's view, this was already in the bag. However, this extra reward was the most important thing. Being able to become friends with such a person, no matter what was beneficial to him. It could be said that it would be of great help to his future career. You can talk about it after you beat me, Xiao Yang said coldly. These words were also very clever. Now, Xiao Yang did not know which tribe to talk about. After all, there were only a few people who could use the power of thunder. If he said something wrong, then his identity might be suspected. Heirin smiled with satisfaction. He appreciated this kind of attitude of waiting for a good price. If a person wanted to be treated well, then he naturally needed to show all his abilities. After all, no one was a fool. The more he performed, the better he would be treated in the future. It seems that you really want to try my ability, but it doesn't matter. Then I'll let you see, Heirin said with a smile. As for the previous danger, those thunderbolts made his clothes a little charred, but Heirin was not angry. He was even more curious now. Just now, everyone was attacking tentatively. Then, what kind of ability would this young man in front of him show next? As for the woman, standing to the side, Heirin did not look at her from the beginning to the end, because to him, it was no longer important, whether she was powerful or not. It was indeed not that important. The most important thing was still how many surprises this person in front of him would bring. Princess Mingzhu almost fell into her own puzzle because she was thinking about where she had seen this statue before. Sometimes the more persistent a person was, the easier it was for them to get lost in their thoughts. They really wanted to find out everything and understand everything clearly. That was why she missed out on a lot. At this time, she also quietly came back to her senses. Looking at the battle situation, she also understood that Xiao Yang was deliberately hiding his strength in order to not alert the enemy. Therefore, if she stood outside the battle and made a move in time, many possibilities would arise. She was very clear on this point. The other party was a Tier 5 powerhouse. Wanting to kill him in one move was probably still not easy. However, if he could coordinate with Xiao Yang's attacks and take advantage of the latter's unpreparedness, there would be a high possibility of success. Thus, when he made a move, he had to be even more cautious. Move like thunder! Xiao Yang shouted angrily. Suddenly, countless thunderbolts appeared in his hands again. Even his entire body was almost wrapped in them. He was like an incomparably huge thunderball, directly rushing over at the fastest speed. His speed was extremely fast, and his power was also not bad. The other party's attacks became more and more fierce because of this, and Heirin also smiled with satisfaction. Sure enough, it was not much different from what he had expected. This young man was worth training. However, in the next moment, Heirin was incomparably shocked because he did not expect that the other party had already rushed over. This speed was simply astonishing, and even somewhat unbelievable. What was going on? Heirin could not understand. The speed was too fast. However, Heirin was not so easy to deal with. He roared angrily, and a cloud of black gas was produced between his hands, almost covering his entire body. Since they were going to compete in strength, there was no harm in giving it a try to see whose ability was higher and whose power was more profound. Even if they were in the same realm, He Ren did not think that anyone could suppress him in strength, not to mention that the other party's realm was lower than his. Therefore, this battle was not much of a problem to begin with. Of course, He Ren was still a little excited. He wanted to give it a try and use patience to feel the power of this rising star. The more he knew, the more relieved he would be. If he had been in a state of tentative ignorance, then he would feel very terrible. The more he knew, the easier it would be to teach when the time came. He would not be unable to do anything in a state of ignorance. In the blink of an eye, He Ren had also calmed down. Boom! The two of them collided, and immediately the thunderbolts and the black gas also began to fight. The black gas was constantly rising, turning into layers of water mist. The black gas was originally the power of water. It was just that He Ren's methods were better, and he refined it to this point, allowing it to sublimate. Although the thunderbolts looked extremely bright, under the erosion of the black gas, they gradually began to dim. This glance made people feel even more anxious. Xiao Yang was still erupting with his own thunderbolts. He was now more or less competitive. In this battle of strength, he wanted to win. Since he wanted to win, then he naturally needed to invest more power in it. Therefore, he could not hesitate in the slightest. As the power continued to pour in, He Ren's heart was even more shocked. This guy's power was actually so rich. He Ren was also a young man. When he was young and vigorous, how could his competitive heart be weaker than his opponent? Both of them were constantly increasing their power, as if they wanted to fight to the end. The surrounding air also became more and more restless because of this. They both wanted to win, but in the end, only one of them could win. Boom! As the power of the two of them continued to pour in, it finally became difficult to control and exploded. Both of them were unable to control themselves, and they flew backward, looking very weak. However, He Ren was very satisfied and smiled. This person really did not let him down. Golden Light Massacre. Chapter 2534. Princess Mingzhu seized the opportunity. When He Ren was forced to retreat, she attacked without hesitation. The sword momentum that was still contained in the scabbard poured out the moment the treasure sword was unsheathed. Countless sword chis gathered into a huge sword chi at this moment and slashed toward the young man who was flying backward. This was a great opportunity. If she missed it, it would probably not appear again. Princess Mingzhu was an extremely decisive person. She knew very well that from the battle between Xiao Yang and He Ren earlier, she could tell that he was a very difficult opponent to deal with. If she could not kill him in time, there would be endless trouble in the future. Therefore, killing him in time was the best choice. In an instant, He Ren also felt an incomparably huge sword momentum charging toward him. In fact, rays of golden light appeared in front of his eyes and enveloped him. The sharp intent also made He Ren feel a chill in his heart. He knew very well that if he was hit, the consequences would be unimaginable. For a moment, He Ren had mixed feelings. He never thought that such an unforeseen event would suddenly occur. Everything was out of his expectations. In fact, he found it hard to accept. However, it had already happened. No matter how unhappy he was, he had to bear it. Running away would not solve the problem. He could only face it. After all, things had already come to this point. No matter how much he thought about it, it would be useless. Xiao Yang revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Princess Mingzhu did not disappoint him. She made a move at the most critical moment. It could be said that she turned the tide and made everything start to move in the direction of settling the dust. After such a long time, they could be said to have gone through life and death together. The tacit understanding between the two of them had also been cultivated to an excellent state. Sometimes there was no need to communicate with words. They could know each other's thoughts by just looking at what the other party was doing and how they should cooperate. However, He Ren was not so easy to deal with. He had experienced countless wars and faced many critical moments at the same time. Since there was a change, he naturally knew how to deal with it. Ren let out a furious roar in the air, and a huge black shadow became faintly discernible. Boom! The golden sword Chi hit the black shadow. Immediately, the Ren was sent flying and changed direction. It crashed into the wall, and the entire place shook. It could be seen how terrifying the power of the sword was. Seeing that, Princess Mingzhu immediately drew her sword and slashed down again. Since this sword strike couldn't take your life, then what's the harm in adding another strike? In any case, I have to take advantage of this opportunity to make you die here. If you continue to hesitate, then you will be the scariest. Moreover, he couldn't even give his opponent a chance to catch his breath. Otherwise, he would be digging his own grave. He had to be decisive when making a move. He could not be hesitant in the slightest. Before Ren could even stand up from the ground, he felt the sword force attacking him once again. Immediately, he was even more shocked in his heart. Who would have thought that these fellows would be so vicious? They wanted to tie him up one by one until he was dead. This was something that Ren hadn't expected, and he smiled bitterly in his heart. He thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable, and had experienced countless storms and waves. Who would have thought that he would fail miserably today? The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable Ren felt. He never would have thought that he would face such a dangerous situation today. However, Ren was Ren. No matter how you schemed against him, he had many life-saving methods. Otherwise, how could he have survived so many dangers? As a person who was valued by the tribe, the treatment he received was something that many people couldn't hope to achieve. With a thought, Ren's body once again emitted a black chi. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge black tortoise and collided with the sword force. After Princess Mingzhu saw the black tortoise's shadow, she couldn't help but be surprised. However, she had already attacked with her sword, and it was almost impossible for her to take it back. Therefore, no matter what, she could only continue to bite the bullet. Boom! Countless golden sword chis were broken, and the woman was also unable to withstand the enormous force and was sent flying. After Xiaoyang stood up, he looked at Ren, who was surrounded by black chi, and frowned again. He was also a little surprised now, but after thinking about it carefully, it was normal. As a genius of the upper 3 divisions who was focused on training, how could some of the methods and treasures he had be taken lightly? Those things must be endless. Back then, he had been able to kill Zhu Lubin so easily because he had taken advantage of the convenience of Pig Ear's identity and caught him off guard. If the two of them were to fight, even if they were in the same realm, it would not be easy for Xiaoyang to kill him. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang couldn't help but gasp. From the looks of it, he had indeed thought too highly of himself. Now he wanted to continue to attack, but he didn't have the chance. Ren stood up shakily. He glared angrily, and the smile on the corner of his mouth became a little bleak. It was as if he was mocking himself. Ren originally thought that he had met a wonderful person who could be trained well to become his lackey. However, he didn't expect that this person was not from the Wanshou realm and wanted to kill him. All of his schemes were impossible to guard against. If it wasn't for the fact that he had a lot of tricks up his sleeve, he might have lost his life here. Crack! Cracking sounds kept ringing out, and some pieces of armor kept falling off from Ren's body. Ren's smile froze again. He looked at the woman who had been forced to the side, and his eyes were filled with shock. Is this sword momentum so domineering? Ren muttered, feeling even more uncomfortable. What he was wearing was black armor. This black armor was a spiritual weapon refined from his own carapace after one of his ancestors passed away. It also had many magical uses and was a good protective talisman. It was also because of this black armor that he was able to survive in many dangerous situations and even kill his opponents when they least expected it. But today, under these two swords, it was broken. This result almost made Ren collapse. This black armor had accompanied him for thousands of years, and it was the remains left behind by his ancestor, but it was gone just like that. The sound of it falling to the ground could be heard clearly, and He Ren's emotions were on the verge of collapse. Chapter 2535. In the blink of an eye, Xiaoyang also drew out the Thunder Fire Divine Sword. After Princess Mingzhu showed the two swords, He Ren must have figured out their identities, so there was no point in continuing to hide. Therefore, it was better to take advantage of this opportunity to kill He Ren directly to prevent future troubles. However, looking at He Ren, who was in a daze, Xiaoyang still did not dare to act rashly because he did not know what was going on with He Ren. If he acted rashly, he was afraid that the final result would be some trouble for himself. Princess Mingzhu snorted. She held the sword in her hand and still looked arrogant. So what if he had failed before? Now, she was more concerned about how to fight and how to kill this big trouble. From the various means, they could see that this guy was not simple. Moreover, he was a 5th-level martial royal at such a young age. He would definitely become a great enemy in the future. You are the people from the Four-Realm Alliance, right? He Ren suddenly smiled bitterly and said. Xiaoyang nodded slightly. They would be exposed if they attacked. Even if they denied it, it would be meaningless. I have been wondering how you did it, from the death of Shengong Qi of the Multicolor tribe to the death of Xie Jianqing of the Bailey tribe. I think it is impossible, even if you have the help of Mo Luo. After all, those sword scars were not created by him. Now, I have the honor to experience your great skills and cooperation. You do have such ability. He Ren smiled bitterly. Both of them were 4th-level martial royal, which was not enough. However, the strength of the other party was more than that. They also made good use of their mentality and caught them off guard with a surprise attack. They could really kill them. Thinking of this, everything seemed to be not strange. Many of his doubts were easily solved. He Ren could also be sure that these two people stirred up the storm in the beast realm with their 4th-level martial royal ability. Their means were really powerful. You are really powerful. He Ren affirmed again. Now, He Ren looked at Xiaoyang in a different way. He felt that if they were not on opposite sides, they would be very good friends. If they were at the same cultivation level, they would be very good opponents. The battle between them would definitely be a hearty one, making everyone feel incomparably delighted. However, all of this was just a fantasy. In the end, reality was cruel, and it wouldn't go according to one's thoughts. He Ren coughed violently twice and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was clear that even though the black armor had blocked most of the sword force, he still couldn't avoid it and was injured. The cooperation between the two of you is seamless. However, it's a pity that it's still not enough to kill me. He Ren smiled. Confidence, once again, appeared on her face. Although the two of them had stirred up chaos in the Wanshou realm and caused everyone to be in danger, that was how their cultivation realms were. Most of the time, they didn't rely on their strength but their brains. Their scheming was the most terrifying thing. When a person had the intention to scheme against everything and began to reverse it and carry it out, it was indeed incomparably terrifying. How would you know if you don't try? Xiaoyang smiled indifferently. He Ren nodded. He felt that this statement was also valid. After all, he was lucky enough to escape the calamity because of the black armor's protection. If the previous method was used again, He Ren still wouldn't die because he still had other methods. However, if there were other variables, then everything would become difficult to say. Then you can give it a try. He Ren's expression was very calm as he said. Since the crisis had formed, there was no way to avoid it. Of course, He Ren was still curious about the strength of the two people. He also wanted to see how powerful the two people who could stir up a storm in the Wanshou realm were. Originally, such opponents should appreciate each other, but unfortunately, their statuses were not so equal. Princess Mingzhu gently stroked the blade of her sword. At the same time, she was ready to attack again. Since you want to die, then I'll fulfill your wish. What's there to be afraid of? Since things had already developed to this point, it could be said that there was no way to avoid it. Therefore, there was no harm in fighting this battle. In an instant, the atmosphere became tense again. A great battle was unavoidable and was about to break out. Xiao Yang watched calmly and began to quickly analyze the current situation. It seemed that it would be difficult to win now. However, no matter what, it was worth a try. It was fine if he didn't attack, but once he did, he had to be ruthless enough to kill his opponent. "Why don't you attack?" He Ren said with a smile. There was a hint of mockery in He Ren's eyes. It was as if he was waiting for his opponent to attack, and he could find an opportunity to counterattack at any time. In the face of such provocation, Xiao Yang did not panic. He knew that it was just a mockery from the other party, and there was no need to pay attention to it. However, in the next moment, he held the sword in his hand horizontally. The aura of lightning and flames rose, and it could be said that they complemented each other. The battle between them was bound to cause some commotion. Therefore, they had to end the battle quickly. Otherwise, if they provoked some powerhouses, it would not be easy for them to escape. Therefore, what they had to do next would be very serious. Strands of power continued to gather, and the power became even more terrifying. After sensing the sword aura, He Ren could not help but frown. He also knew that there were many terrifying things in it. In the next moment, He Ren also moved quickly. His hands were constantly moving, and he was also about to counterattack. If he kept waiting for his opponent to attack, it would be no different from waiting for death. In this battle, even if he was the slightest bit careless, he would probably be at a disadvantage. Sometimes, only by taking the initiative to attack could one control the initiative. If he kept being a yes man, he would probably be in a state of being beaten, and in the end, it would be too late for regrets. Immediately, the waves of black gas kept gathering, and the aura became much heavier. The circulation of the black gas was like a river, surging in a regular pattern. It was a very shocking sight. In fact, it was filled with a very strange feeling that made people feel a little uncomfortable. It was as if they were in a vast ocean. The strange feeling made people have an unspeakable feeling. Drowning in the ocean. Chapter 25:36. With a low shout, the black gas became very thin and quickly spread out. There did not seem to be anything special about it. It was as if there was nothing special about this move. In fact, not even the slightest bit of killing intent could be felt. However, at the next moment, Xiao Yang turned pale with fright. This was because his feeling had changed. He felt as if he was in a vast ocean, and even breathing had become somewhat difficult, as if he was about to suffocate. When he breathed heavily, it was as if seawater had filled his nasal cavity, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. However, the water could not be seen or touched. It was as if the air had become no longer air but seawater. Such a mysterious move could be said to be unexpected and unexpected. "Be careful, this is a domain," Xiao Yang suddenly shouted. He did not expect that He Ren's technique would be so powerful. As expected of a genius who is respected by countless people, these methods could be said to be easy to grasp. Due to some of the previous battle situations, He Ren was at a disadvantage. However, with this move, he changed the illusion of the battle, and everything was beneficial to him. It could be said that he had reversed the universe. This person was indeed unfathomable, not to mention his cultivation base. Just this kind of countermeasure was enough to make people fear him. Princess Mingzhu had read a lot of books, and she had learned a lot of things. After hearing what He Ren said, she understood what was going on. She frowned slightly and only cared about accumulating the sword momentum. In her opinion, a single sword strike could break all laws. If it could not, it meant that she was not strong enough. Why should she think so much? As long as she was strong enough, this sword strike could turn the situation around. As for other things, she did not need to worry about them at all, although she might be in danger in this domain. However, with a companion like Xiao Yang, she felt that she did not need to think about it. With him around, it was enough. She only needed to attack. Whether it succeeded or not, it would all depend on her actions. Amazing you can even see that. However, it's too late now. Since I've used this move, don't even think about leaving. Rin sneered. As many things were exposed, Rin also admired this outsider very much. His ability was indeed not bad. Unfortunately, they were now enemies and not friends. Even if they were enemies, Black Rin would still enjoy this battle. After all, it would be difficult to meet such an opponent in the future. Therefore, it was an honor to be able to fight him. Xiao Yang let out a cold snort. Immediately, the divine sword in his hand burned with raging flames. Countless wisps of green smoke appeared continuously. Fire and water have been incompatible since ancient times. Xiao Yang's idea was very simple. That was to destroy all the water here. This way, your domain will naturally cease to exist. But then, the pressure Xiao Yang felt increased. It was as if the more intense the resistance, the greater the pressure exerted by the domain. It was unbearable. Xiao Yang also felt this change, and his eyebrows furrowed even more. It wasn't that he couldn't break this technique with fire. It was just that his current strength wasn't enough. So he suffered more backlash. If Xiaohuo was here and used his full strength, it would be enough. However, Xiaohuo was now in Mount Tianhua. It was almost impossible to borrow its power. Therefore, this made him feel very uncomfortable. Moreover, with the passage of time, this domain would only become more and more solid, and even more difficult to destroy. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. He couldn't drag it on any longer. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang frowned. He didn't think much about it. In the blink of an eye, countless sword qi surged out to contend with it. If it's just a contest of strength, I'll fight with you. If I can attract all your attention, it will create an opportunity for Princess Mingzhu. That's not a bad choice. Princess Mingzhu was indeed accumulating her strength now, but it was very difficult to change it. They were more or less suppressed now. It was not easy for them to use their full strength to deliver a fatal blow. Therefore, she was also waiting for an opportunity. Thunder prison, true fire kill. Xiao Yang roared angrily. Suddenly, he turned into a flaming sword qi and charged forward. However, due to the restriction of this domain, his speed became much slower. He wasn't as fast as before. However, his power was still difficult to ignore. His thoughts and ideas were so firm. No matter how many tricks you have, I will only charge forward. Seeing his opponent charging at him without any regard for his life, Rin still sneered. However, after sensing the lightning around him, his smile froze. Although his domain could greatly suppress the flames, it was difficult to stop the lightning. Rin felt a headache when he saw the lightning bolts converging toward him. How could he have forgotten this point? This person's cultivation of these two forces was not bad at all. Moreover, the spiritual weapon in his hand has a great support for these two powers. Immediately, Rin roared and suddenly spread out his hands. Suddenly, countless black qi flowed out. Obviously, he wanted to use his own power to shatter all the lightning so that it could not threaten him. However, this power alone was enough to prevent the lightning from slowing down at all. At this moment, Rin realized that he had underestimated his opponent. In the blink of an eye, his expression became more serious. Although there was a gap between their realms, there didn't seem to be much of a gap in other aspects. For example, his combat skills and calculations weren't bad at all. If he wanted to defeat his opponent with the suppression of his realm, although it was the truth, it was also a little ridiculous. A battle of life and death was not decided by one's realm. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many impossible things. Good. Then let me experience your skills. Rin roared angrily. Rin hated this feeling very much. He was even a little angry. The other party's fighting style was indeed very annoying. However, since things had come to this, he could only continue to fight. If he defeated his opponent as soon as possible, these troubles would naturally come to an end. If he continued to delay, he was afraid that the more he saw, the more unhappy he would be. Then, ending the battle as soon as possible was the best way to avoid any twists and turns and unforeseen events. Surging waves. Chapter 25:37. Layers of black gas could be said to be undulating at this moment, constantly surging in all directions. It was a dazzling sight to behold. However, the pressure emitted from the layers of aura was extremely terrifying. The aura was so strong that even a person who had just become a martial emperor would find it difficult to resist it. Everything seemed very calm, but there was killing intent hidden within. The Blackwater tribe's attacks were very strange. They did not seem to be much of a threat, but they were surging in the dark and could kill people without leaving a trace. Princess Mingzhu tightly held onto her treasured sword. Layers of sword aura were continuously emitted from her body, forming a sword barrier in front of her. Many times, one could not see with their eyes because what they saw was not real. Only by sensing with their senses would one know how terrifying the power was. Right now, Princess Mingzhu also felt that it was very strenuous. It was as if everything was already decided. It was impossible for them to turn the situation around. That made people feel very vexed and helpless. Many times it was like that. No matter how powerful one was, one still had to lower one's head in front of reality. However, Princess Mingzhu had her own pride. Even though she knew that it was almost impossible to turn the situation around in such a situation, she still wanted to try. But she still wanted to give it a try. Maybe she could really do it? If she was always afraid and did not dare to face it, that would be the worst situation. Sometimes, if she had the courage to try, she might discover something different. It was even possible for her to survive in a hopeless situation. As such, Princess Mingzhu continued to accumulate sword aura. With this sword, she needed to turn the situation around. Otherwise, her companion's efforts might turn into nothing or even be wasted. That was not a situation she wanted to see. As such, it would be best if she could change it. If she could not, then there was nothing she could do. She could only do her best and leave it to fate. Right now, Xiaoyang was under enormous psychological pressure. He did not expect the situation to be so terrible. In the end, he did not understand enough and had underestimated his opponent. In the past, when he challenged those of a higher realm, he was mostly in the 3rd, 6th, and 9th level. That was why he could easily do it. However, the Black Rin was a 9 and belonged to the strongest group of people in the same realm. That was why Xiaoyang was having such a hard time and had fallen into a deadlock. The flaming sword qi in front of him shattered the moment the waves came over. From this, it was enough to see how terrifying the power of those waves was. If he was really hit, what would the result be? Thinking of this, Xiaoyang smiled bitterly. Most of the time, things didn't go as planned. No matter how much you calculated, because you didn't know enough, you couldn't calculate everything to the extreme. Therefore, the gap between them would naturally become apparent, and it would be difficult for you to reverse it. However, Xiaoyang was unwilling to admit defeat. Even though he knew that Yi Shiwen was very strong, and that his attack this time might not be able to achieve the expected effect, he still made a move. The statue was still standing there, allowing the waves to push against it. It did not move at all, as if it was not affected at all. As the layers of sword qi shattered, Xiaoyang also constantly stimulated new sword qi to block the opponent's attack. At the same time, his will was completely raised. Those thunderbolts also all shrank, causing the Black Rin to be in even more pain. His power was limited in defending against the thunderbolts. Although he had destroyed most of them, the remaining ones were enough to make him suffer. At this moment, Xiaoyang also arrived, and the sword in his hand was handed out. He was relying on his will to support himself. He also knew that his sword had to be improved. Only in this way could he create an opportunity. Otherwise, if they retreated, they would be completely suppressed. He had to break the current situation. It was still difficult to do it with Lei Yu alone. Therefore, the sword in his hand had to be improved. Black Rin also felt that the scorching aura was attacking him. Suddenly, his mind couldn't help but tremble. He looked up and saw that the young man had already rushed over, looking very tenacious. Even though his expression became distorted due to the pain, and even his body was trembling, the hand holding the sword was as steady as Mount Tai. It was as if his sword was incomparably firm. Even if the sky collapsed, it would not be able to change it. Such a temperament could be said to be extremely terrifying. Black Rin was also very shocked. Now he also felt that it was an eye-opener. No wonder this person could do so many things. He was a powerful person. At the same time, he was also a ruthless person. Not only was he ruthless to his opponent, but he was also ruthless to himself. Such a person was indeed very terrifying. It was not a good choice to be enemies with him. However, things had already developed to this point. They would not give up easily. Even so, what can you do? This battle was destined from the beginning. You can't win. No matter how ruthless you are, you can't completely reverse it. Black Rin laughed and endured the pain of being struck by lightning. What he said was very true. At least in Black Ren's opinion, this was the case. No one could change it. The truth was the truth. No matter how hard you tried, it was useless. However, what answered him was the burning sword piercing directly into his chest. Countless sword chi surged out and poured into his body. At this moment, Black Ren's eyes were filled with shock. How was this possible? Under these layers of obstruction, how could his sword pierce into his body so inconceivably? Hei Ren's eyes were filled with doubt. He felt that this was completely impossible, but it had happened to him. It could be said that from the moment the black armor shattered, Black Ren no longer had any good defensive equipment. At least, there was no defensive equipment that could block the Thunder Fire Divine sword's blade. Get lost! Black Ren suddenly roared and directly slapped out with his palm. Immediately, Xiaoyang was hit by this palm. The aura in his body was also scattered. That breath was also scattered and could no longer be maintained. His entire body was sent flying uncontrollably. The layers of turbulent waves were also constantly hitting his body. It was very cruel. It was as if countless ferocious beasts were fiercely attacking him. It was as if they wanted to smash him into dust and consign him to eternal damnation. Azure Sky Sword Rain. Chapter 2538. Princess Mingzhu, who had been accumulating her sword force for a long time, made her move. She felt that this was the best opportunity. Moreover, if she didn't make a move now, her situation would become precarious. This was because the sword defense around her had been completely destroyed under the impact of the waves. As she thrust out her sword, a hole was immediately cut open in the waves, creating a small gap for her to survive and be affected by the attack. Countless streaks of green sword chi fell like a continuous drizzle, slashing towards the youth who was being whipped by the lightning and attacked by the flames. Although the speed of the sword chi had slowed down a lot in this domain, and even increased the wear and tear, it was still not to be underestimated. Princess Mingzhu's sword could be said to be incomparably domineering, and even a little unreasonable. It was as if the power of the sword force was not worn down by the black gas and all of it shot out. At this moment, Hei Ren also felt the incomparably terrifying aura. He looked at the densely packed sword chi attacking him, and his expression immediately became even more helpless and shocked. The coordination of these two fellows' attacks could be said to be complementing each other, and they did not give him any chance to catch his breath. Such cooperation was very powerful. Even he, Hei Ren, was complaining incessantly, let alone those ordinary people. Perhaps, when facing such an attack, they would have already panicked and did not even know how to deal with it. Hei Ren roared angrily. He did not care about the lightning and flames. If he was hit by the sword chi again, the consequences would be even more terrifying. It was even possible that he would be heavily injured again and give the other party a chance. Break! Hey Ren roared angrily, and immediately, layers of waves were pushed out continuously. However, this time it was one-sided, and it was only facing the sword chi. Under the incomparably domineering sword chi, Heirin did not dare to relax in the slightest. Therefore, he had to concentrate his strength to break it, so as to avoid any unforeseen events that would make it difficult for him to withstand or even cause more trouble. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, had a cold expression on her face. It was as if she had completely expected Heiren's actions and resistance. She did not take it to heart at all. However, in the blink of an eye, Heiren knew what domineering was. No matter how brilliant his techniques were, he was able to destroy countless sword chis. However, there were still many domineering sword chis that passed through the waves and pierced his body. Immediately, Heiren also retreated step by step, showing a difficult stance. Heiren was even more shocked. This was simply too illogical. Could it be that these two people were monsters? It was a fighting style that didn't care about one's life and was willing to trade a life for a life. As for the other, his attacks were tyrannical and unreasonable. When these two people walked together and cooperated with each other very well, it really made people feel incomparably fearful and fearful. In the next moment, Heiren's pupils suddenly trembled. He lowered his head to look at his lower abdomen, only to see a black thorn piercing through his body. Black stinger! Heiren suddenly remembered the name of this thing, and his eyes were filled with shock. He was naturally aware of this. Even Zhu Hong was severely injured by the black venom spike. It was also because Shi Yunfeng was present that he suppressed the poison. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. According to Shi Yunfeng, Xiaoyang took a total of 3 black venom spikes. Because he failed to assassinate Zhu Hong, he still had 2 in his hands, and one of them pierced into his body. Xiaoyang also knew that it was extremely difficult to kill Heiren with his strength in such a domain. Moreover, as time dragged on, their situation would become more and more dangerous. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to hide this move. It could be said that what he had done before was just to pave the way. As for Princess Mingzhu's sword move, it was to hide it so that he would not be able to detect the slightest ripple. Only by doing so could he succeed in his plot. Therefore, when Princess Mingzhu slashed out with her sword, the black venom spike had already left her hand. Seeing that the black venom spike had successfully pierced into Heiren's body, Xiaoyang revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth. This difficult battle was finally about to end. Heiren felt that his body was gradually becoming numb, and the circulation of his qi was becoming much slower. He felt that his world was becoming gray. He did not expect that he would fail miserably in this place today. The smile at the corner of his mouth became much more bitter. It could be said that Heiren had been very vigilant from the beginning. However, he had forgotten that Xiaoyang still had such a killing move in his hands. Moreover, he had been careless and had been hit. The more he thought about it, the more regretful he felt. Why didn't I end the battle earlier? In the end, I gave my opponent a chance and almost fell into a dead end. As Heiren's movements became slower, there were problems with the circulation of his qi. The drowning ocean that he had unleashed also began to fluctuate and could no longer be maintained. In the blink of an eye, the domain collapsed. Xiaoyang fell to the ground, and his expression looked even more painful. He had paid too much for the probing attack that he had placed, and he had long been overwhelmed. Now he could finally heave a sigh of relief. The battle was over. Princess Mingzhu was also a little limp, but she was still standing. However, her expression had become very dispirited. This battle did not seem to have any big movements, but it had consumed a lot of their mind and strength, causing them to be extremely exhausted. "I really underestimated you," Heiren said with a bitter smile. The other party could be said to have calculated everything, making it impossible to guard against. Even someone like Heiren would inevitably fall for it. This was also something that he admired. even though he knew that it was difficult to reverse the situation under the general trend. He knew how to create opportunities and use some unexpected methods to decide the battle situation. Although this method seemed very sinister, in a battle of life and death, if one wanted to survive, one had to be unscrupulous towards the weaker party. Otherwise, it would be death. You are indeed very powerful. It can be said that this is the most difficult and sullen battle that the two of us have fought so far, Xiaoyang said with a bitter smile. Back then, when Xiaoyang was only a third-level martial emperor, it was not so difficult to deal with Qi of the multicolor tribe. As expected, there was a difference in strength between each tribe. The fifth-level powerhouses of the upper three tribes and the lower three tribes were really worlds apart. Of course, He Rin was the best in the entire beast realm. His ability was much stronger than Qi's. Chapter 2539. He Rin did not fall, but his perception had begun to slow down, and his eyes became dull. He also wanted to resist, but his current state was too terrible. Even if he had the heart, he was powerless. Even a wise man would make a mistake. Even though He Rin was very cautious in every detail and was on guard, there would always be some inconspicuous things that would be overlooked. This was something that Xiaoyang had grasped. Furthermore, after many calculations, he had succeeded in his plan. The corner of He Ren's mouth was also filled with a helpless and bitter smile. He was also very clear that he would probably have to die here today. Although there was a lot of unwillingness in his heart, things had already developed to this point. What else could he do? If he was seriously injured, He Rin could still fight back and kill his way out. However, now that he was poisoned, his strength was weak, and his aura had become chaotic. It was crashing in his body, which made it impossible for him to gather his strength to fight back. Xiaoyang was also constantly adjusting his aura. Now he also wanted to give He Rin a fatal blow, but the price he paid before was too great, so he could not spare the strength to do so. It was the same for Princess Mingzhu. The 2 slashes had nearly exhausted all of her strength. Therefore, the 3 of them were in a stalemate. If one of them could recover some strength first and counterattack, then they could break the stalemate. You're really different. You're very powerful. He Rin sighed sincerely. He had always thought that he was cunning and powerful enough. However, who would have thought that things would turn out like this? He had also fallen into the other party's trap. The more he thought about it, the angrier He Rin felt. At the same time, he also admired these 2 people because they were indeed qualified to be his opponents. It would be a pity if they couldn't have a head-on battle to see whose methods were superior. You're not bad either. Xiaoyang said with a bitter smile. This person's ability was indeed very troublesome. If he did not have the poisonous scorpion tail needle in his hand, it would be hard to say who would win if he used such a miraculous method to turn the situation around and continue fighting. Although Xiaoyang also had other methods, he did not want to expose them too early. After all, these things were left for others. A single He Rin was already pressuring them to the point of being unable to breathe. If it was someone else, then how serious would the consequences be? With this thought in mind, Xiaoyang couldn't help but shiver. Although he had racked his brains to calculate many things, he still somewhat underestimated the experts of the myriad beast realm. Bai Xingyun and Qi were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in front of this black Rin. There was no comparison at all. This is also the most difficult battle we've had so far, Princess Mingzhu said quietly. After receiving such a reply, He Rin smiled again. If he was acknowledged by a weak person, he would feel that it was a humiliation. However, an opponent of equal strength would be an unparalleled honor. This kind of acknowledgement also made people feel incomparably carefree and comfortable in their hearts. He Rin was still trying to suppress the poison, hoping to find an opportunity to escape. After all, who would want to lose their life if they could live? However, his actions did not have much of an effect. Because of the tyrannical poison, the power that he had accumulated with great difficulty was almost disintegrated in a moment. Such a feeling made He-Rin even more miserable. The tail needle was the lifelong cultivation of the scorpion tribe. It could be said that all the poison was condensed in it. Its strength was almost incomprehensible. Even if you were a 5th-level expert, once you were hit, you would suffer great loss and even lose the ability to fight. In the past, He-Rin didn't know why everyone was in awe of the Confusion Barrier tribe, but now he finally understood. The power of the poison was extremely frightening. Furthermore, it was impossible to guard against it. Being hit this time made him feel even more miserable than before. Now that he thought about it, if the identity of the people of the Four-Realm Alliance was not exposed, once the Raging Flame tribe and the Confusion Barrier tribe fought, the result would be really unpredictable. Just thinking about the Raging Flame tribe's fierceness against the Confusion Barrier tribe's strangeness, it was very terrifying. "It seems that you're not in a good state now," He-Rin said with a smile. The other party couldn't kill him in time. In He-Ren's eyes, this was an opportunity. Moreover, he had never given up. As long as there was a slight chance, he would try it. His desire for survival was also very strong. As a God-favored one, how could he fall in this place? Therefore, no matter what, he had to find a way to leave this place. If he didn't even have the will to try, what was the difference between sitting and waiting for death? Xiaoyang also noticed the change in He-Ren's aura. He knew that the other party would not obediently wait for death. As long as he was still alive, he would definitely be a great threat. Therefore, only when he was completely dead would they be able to feel at ease. Princess Mingzhu was also rapidly accumulating power. She also had the intention to kill. For her and Xiaoyang to be unable to defeat this person, it could be seen how powerful he was. Such a great enemy. Once there was a chance, naturally, they would quickly eliminate him. Otherwise, he would become a big problem in the future. Moreover, with the current state of the Four-Realm Alliance, they were not qualified to release a tiger back to the mountain. "It seems that you are also very anxious to kill me." He-Ren's expression changed again. After sensing the other party's killing intent, the hope in He-Ren's heart was also shattered. If he thought about it from another perspective, he would have the initiative in his hands. Therefore, it was impossible for him to let the two of them leave, which would increase the number of powerful enemies in the future. If they were simply opponents, it would be fine. However, behind them were the interests of their respective worlds. These questions were also driving them to not act willfully. They had to consider more things and could not be careless in the slightest. Thinking about these problems, He-Rin took a deep breath. Since there was no way to reverse the situation, he could only leave with dignity. At this time, Xiaoyang had also recovered some strength. He carried the Thunderfire Divine sword and slowly walked over. "What else do you have to say? You can say it now," Xiaoyang said coldly. However, He-Rin smiled bitterly. Even if he had some last words, he said it as if the other party could help him complete them. His skills were not as good as the other party. He was just stretching out his neck to be killed. Why should he be so coy and afraid to kneel and beg for mercy? He, He-Rin, was like a statue, indomitable and indomitable. Suddenly, Xiaoyang tried his best to dodge and disappeared from the spot. Chapter 2540. He-Ren's face was filled with shock when he saw Xiaoyang suddenly disappear from where he stood. This was because he did not understand what was going on. This person's killing intent was extremely strong, but in the blink of an eye, he changed his direction. This action was even more puzzling. Could it be that some unforeseen event had occurred, so that the sword-wielding young man changed his mind? Then what kind of variable would cause him to have no choice but to change his trajectory? These things happened in the blink of an eye. Soon, He-Rin saw the sword-wielding young man use his body to push the woman away, and the divine sword in his hand directly slashed down. This attack was filled with indescribable determination and decisiveness, as if he wanted to cut through something. In an instant, the sound of a golden dagger axe rang out. The sound was so strong that it made one's scalp tingle. Chi! With a soft sound, a sharp light directly pierced through Xiao Yang's body, and the sharp light directly sank into the ground. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. He Rin and Princess Mingzhu were unable to react in time, and only Xiaoyang was able to react. This kind of cold weapon attack was difficult to detect because it did not have much aura. When Xiaoyang sensed it, he wanted to remind Princess Mingzhu to dodge, but it was already too late. Therefore, the only thing he could do was to rescue her personally. However, the other party's cultivation was not shallow. Xiaoyang's sword attack was not able to completely force him away, but only caused him to deviate a little. Princess Mingzhu was a little confused at first, but after seeing the sharp light flash by, her face was filled with shock. She did not expect that there would be a sneak attack behind her. As for herself, she did not realize that Xiaoyang had taken the attack for her. After being hit, the corner of Xiaoyang's mouth kept twitching. Although the attack hurt his heart meridian, it was still difficult to bear. All of a sudden, a smile appeared on He Ren's face. Since someone had launched a sneak attack from the dark, it meant that what happened here was not unknown. The people who attacked these two outsiders could only be from the beast realm. This was the dawn of hope that gave him a chance to live. Looks like I'm not fated to die today, He Rin said with a smile. Her previous decisiveness was swept away. Now that he had a chance to survive, he was naturally very happy. At the same time, He Rin was also very shocked. He felt that this sword-wielding youth was indeed not simple. If he could even guard against such a sneak attack, then how terrifying was his perception? Another person walked out from behind Xiaoyang. His eyes were glowing, and he seemed to have an indescribable elegance. That's amazing. As the man spoke, the smile on his face grew wider. He Ren involuntarily frowned after seeing that person. It seemed that he disliked this person. You are indeed worthy of being my opponent. This kind of reaction really makes one blush with shame. The last time we met, I kept feeling that something was wrong. Who would have thought that you guys were really Fourth Order Martial Emperors? Very powerful indeed. That person continued to exclaim in admiration. Xiaoyang, on the other hand, was not interested in such praise at all. At the same time, he felt very helpless and pained in his heart. Because this person was Xing Tian, his strength was also unfathomable. As a rising star of the profound dragon tribe and an existence that suppressed the He Rin, it was naturally difficult to imagine exactly how formidable his strength was. To deal with He Rin, they had to use all their means, and even take out their trump cards to turn the situation around. Now that Xing Tian had joined in, how could he deal with it? Thinking of this, Xiaoyang's heart became gloomy. Originally, he thought that he could easily take down He Rin. Who would have thought that Xing Tian's appearance would turn the situation around again? If they continued to fight with their current state, they would have no chance of winning. Now, even Princess Mingzhu's emotions had some fluctuations because of this. She also knew that if they continued to fight in the current situation, it would be very disadvantageous for them. It was very likely that they would lose their lives here. Although it was said that they had survived a disaster, He Rin was indeed unable to feel happy, because what he did not want to accept the most was Xing Tian's favor. Although Xing Tian did not have any opinion about the number one person in the younger generation, that was because he was the number one person. However, He Rin wanted that title very much, so he also regarded Xing Tian as his number one enemy. But who would have thought that the person who appeared in time and saved his life today was the person he wanted to defeat the most? The smile on He Ren's face became more and more helpless. He was afraid that this was how the world played with people. Xiaoyang's gaze also wandered around the arena as he began to plan again in his heart. In the current situation, no matter how he looked at it, there was a slim chance of survival. Moreover, he was seriously injured. If he forced a fight, he would undoubtedly be courting death. So, how should he escape next? This was something that he had to think about carefully. Could it be that he could directly use the mountain river map to leave here? Facing Xingtian, it was understandable to use such a method. However, Xiaoyang was still unwilling to give up. If he went back with his tail between his legs, the Four Realms Alliance would most likely suffer crazy revenge once the dust of the tomb had settled. When that time came, who would be able to withstand such a terrifying attack? Thinking about these problems, Xiaoyang felt even more helpless. Things didn't go as planned. Sometimes some variables would appear, and it was indeed hard to predict. In fact, it was even beyond what they could bear. Thinking about this, Xiaoyang's smile became more and more helpless. But what could he do? Princess Mingzhu also noticed Xiaoyang's strange behavior, and she was also seriously considering this matter. After all, escaping was the most important thing now. Although it was said that the brave would win in a narrow path, it also depended on the situation. In their current state, they were no match for Xingtian at all. After we parted last time, I missed you very much. I've always felt that it was a pity that I couldn't see your true faces. Xingtian still had a smile on his face. No matter how one looked at it, Xingtian saw the two of them as good opponents. It was a pity that he could not completely find them in these open and covert fights. However, things were unpredictable. Who would have thought that they would meet by chance today? Moreover, there was a great possibility that he could take them down. Sometimes, luck was also a part of one's strength. It could only be said that these two outsiders were extremely unlucky this time. Chapter 2541. It had to be said that the two of them were indeed cunning and full of tricks. It was naturally a good thing to be able to take them down as soon as possible, lest they cause trouble at any critical juncture in the future. Furthermore, with their abilities, especially their intelligence, they might even cause the entire Wanshou realm to fall into chaos and start infighting. As for these risks, it was naturally the best thing to be able to avoid them. Sometimes, if it was possible to force something, one naturally had to beg for it. Although Xingtian felt that it was not enough, he did not dare to play the game of cat and mouse. After all, these two mice were not ordinary mice. Xiaoyang held the divine sword horizontally, ready to continue the fight. The sword qi around him was faintly discernible, but it was difficult to maintain due to his lack of strength. Seeing that Xiaoyang was still stubbornly holding on, Xingtian shook his head helplessly. This was indeed a respectable opponent, but as long as they fell into the trap, they would expose themselves. Furthermore, this time, he had almost fallen into a situation of certain death. No matter how hard they struggled, it would be difficult to change. This was because there were many things that could not be changed with thoughts. The situation had suddenly reversed, and he had a chance to survive, but He Rin was a little sad. This was indeed a good opponent, but unfortunately his luck was too bad. He would definitely die here today, so there would naturally be no so-called carefree battle in the future. This was the appreciation between experts, but due to many reasons, they had to get rid of him first. Do you think you can definitely keep us here? Xiao Yang suddenly put down his sword and said. At this moment, Xingtian subconsciously stopped moving forward. He was very clear that he had plotted to lure him out, but he seemed to have taken precautions and left a backup plan. This time, would it be the same as the previous time? Moreover, he had a tail needle in his hand. If he was careless and fell into his opponent's trap, he would probably suffer a great loss once he fell into his trap. The previous example had happened before, and if he fell into his trap again, no matter how he looked at it, it would not be justifiable. Thinking of this, Xingtian could not help but feel a headache. What was going on? The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. However, this was often how things were, so he had no choice but to be more careful. You can give it a try, Xingtian probed. Xiaoyang smiled and nodded. Soon after, he waved his hand and a picture appeared, wrapping the towering statue within it. He wants to leave. He Rin shouted. From Xiaoyang's actions, He Rin could only come to this conclusion. If they were going to fight, they would definitely use their ritual implements to fight instead of going for the opportunity. This person was truly greedy. Not only did he want to escape, he even wanted to take away the fortunate encounters in this place. Such a method could be said to be whimsical. But sometimes taking a risk and giving it a try could indeed lead to a different outcome. And the prerequisite for all of this was to have the guts to do so. If he didn't even dare to try, then he wouldn't gain anything. Xing Tian was also stunned for a moment. He didn't think that the other party was actually bluffing and only wanted to delay him. He didn't dare to act rashly. Mysterious poison needle. With a loud shout, Xiaoyang waved his sleeves and countless poisonous needles shot out from his sleeves. Xing Tian was even more shocked when he saw the countless poison needles flying towards him. Could it be the stinger of a poisonous scorpion mixed in? Thinking of this, Xing Tian didn't dare to be careless. He immediately waved his hands, and waves of powerful energy were constantly sent out, forming layers of walls in front of him to protect him. Because of the fear of poison, even someone as strong as Xing Tian didn't dare to take the risk. He was indeed very fearful. If anything went wrong, he would have to give up his life here. In such a desperate situation, the other party wouldn't think about whether his methods were in accordance with the rules. He only wanted to kill his enemy. As for what methods he used, it naturally didn't seem that important. At the same time, a woman shouted in a low voice. Countless sword qi flew out continuously, and the target was still Xing Tian. The two's attacks were coordinated, wave after wave, and they were very well coordinated. In the blink of an eye, the mountain river map took the statue and returned to Xiaoyang's hands. Princess Mingzhu quickly came in front of Xiaoyang and raised her sword into the sky. This sword intent was one of the life-saving measures that Princess Mingzhu had prepared for herself. It was so that she could kill her opponent by surprise when she was exhausted. However, she didn't expect that she would have to use it today. With this sword, the treasure sword in her hand shattered inch by inch. The middle-grade spiritual level magic weapon was destroyed just like that. Princess Mingzhu didn't have time to feel sorry. She grabbed Xiaoyang and rushed into the sky. The most important thing now was to get out of this dangerous situation. By the time Xing Tian was done dealing with the poison needles and sword qi, all he saw was an empty hull. Xing Tian smiled bitterly. He had used a sneak attack to severely injure Xiaoyang. He originally thought that it was a sure thing and that he could subdue Xiaoyang. He didn't expect that there would be another change, and he still let Xiaoyang escape. Xing Tian shook his head, helplessly. When he saw that the opportunity was taken away, he almost went crazy in his heart. However, he still maintained a calm attitude. Even if he threw a tantrum now, it would be useless. Although Xing Tian thought of chasing after them, the two would definitely not dare to fight him because they were running away. He could still gain something by wasting some time. However, he didn't do that. Instead, he walked toward He Ren. If Xing Tian really left, He Ren's life would be in danger. Eat this now. Your cultivation is deep, so you should be able to suppress the poison. If you find Shi Yunfeng, you still have a chance to live. Xing Tian threw a bottle and said helplessly. It was a great opportunity, but both of them were afraid, so they could only stop. He Ren took the pill and swallowed it without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, his expression changed rapidly. Xing Tian raised his head and looked at the hole opened by the sword, then looked at the fragments scattered on the ground. He covered his forehead, looking very tired. In this plan, he had put in a lot of effort, but unfortunately it was still not enough. It seems that the next time we meet, I have to think more before I can make you stay. Xing Tian smiled bitterly. Chapter 2542. After Princess Mingzhu escaped with Xiaoyang, she immediately ran in another direction. She did not know if Xing Tian would continue to pursue them, but this place had become a dangerous place, so they had to leave. Fortunately, they did not alarm the other experts. If a few more came, they would probably face a situation where they could not escape even if they grew wings. Even though she was out of the tomb, she still had lingering fears. Now that most people had entered the tomb, there were not many people on the god Calamity mountain range. Their appearance had caused a huge commotion, so it was quiet and they could escape. There was no need to continue being on tenterhooks. However, even under such circumstances, Princess Mingzhu did not dare to relax in the slightest. With a few leaps, she quickly ran in another direction. She probably could not continue staying in the God Calamity mountain range. After this chaos, it was likely that these people would also initiate some emergency plans. Now that Xiaoyang was heavily injured, she did not know how he was, so it was better to nurse his injuries first before continuing to plan other things. As for Zuoxia, she would just let him go on his own. If he really had the ability, he would naturally be able to walk out alive. Now that Princess Mingzhu could not even protect herself, she naturally did not have the time to care about others. The moon hung high in the sky, and the night sky became very quiet. They were like a white streak of light, gradually moving into the distance. They had thought that the attack this time was a great opportunity to kill a rank 5 expert. But who would have thought that the unforeseen event would come so quickly, catching them off guard? In fact, even they themselves had almost lost their lives in the battle. Thinking of that, Princess Mingzhu still felt rather displeased. However, she was also helpless. Since it had already happened, there was nothing she could do. However, the change this time also gave them a reminder. This was the territory of the Myriad Beast realm, so everything was beneficial to them. As outsiders, they could be said to be isolated and without help. Moreover, they had to act decisively and resolutely. If there was the slightest mistake, they might be dragged into the abyss. 2 hours later, Princess Mingzhu left the God Calamity mountain range and found a more secluded place to stay. "Thank you for your help this time," Princess Mingzhu said guiltily. If she had been more vigilant, sensed the existence of that attack earlier, and avoided it in time, Xiaoyang wouldn't have had to step forward at that critical moment and block that attack with his own body. And they wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. If Xiaoyang was not injured, even if Xing Tian arrived, they would still have the strength to fight. However, there was a prerequisite for that. Once those prerequisites were gone, there was no point in saying anything more. As such, what they could do was very limited. Xiaoyang waved his hand indifferently and said, "It's just a small problem. It's not worth mentioning." However, although he said those words lightly, a gust of cold wind caused him to cough nonstop. In fact, he even coughed up blood. As Princess Mingzhu watched, she became even more anxious. She felt that she was a little clumsy when it came to this companion of hers. It seemed that whenever there was a problem, Xiaoyang would take care of it. Otherwise, they would have lost their lives due to the numerous possibilities in the Wanshou realm. "This is an elixir refined by my father. Take it first to suppress your injuries," Princess Mingzhu said helplessly. Xiaoyang nodded with a smile. Without being courteous, he consumed the elixir and began to suppress his injuries. Princess Mingzhu, on the other hand, stood at the side. Her divine sense had spread out to a radius of 5 kilometers, so that no mishaps would occur. Although it was impossible for a powerhouse who could threaten their safety to appear in this place, they still had to be on guard. If any more variables were to appear, the consequences would most likely become extremely terrifying. Moreover, under such a situation, they had to be careful no matter what they did. Everyone knew that it was better to be safe than sorry. However, most of them had to experience it before they could do it. Princess Mingzhu did not feel any heartache for her treasured sword. Compared to being able to escape alive, other things were naturally not that important. If they lost their lives, even if they had many spiritual weapons, they would only be helping their enemies in the end. After coming to the Wanshou realm and experiencing many things, this woman's mentality had begun to change subtly. She glanced sideways at the man from time to time. There was tenacity between his brows. It was as if he was indifferent to everything. Sometimes, shouldn't he think more about it? If she relied on others for everything, what was the use of her other than putting in effort? Would she even become a burden in the end? The more questions she thought, the more Princess Mingzhu felt a headache coming on. Among all the things that had happened, there were indeed too many inadequacies in what he had done. The cold mountain wind made people sigh. In the tomb, with Xing Tian's help, He Rin had successfully suppressed the poison, but it was only a temporary relief. If the poison could not be guided out in time, it would still be a hidden danger. Therefore, Xing Tian used his methods to search for Shi Yunfeng's whereabouts. Although some almighties from the bewildering tribe had also come, Xing Tian was more willing to believe in Shi Yunfeng's methods. However, Xing Tian did not find Shi Yunfeng. Instead, he met his disciple, Qing Lu. Fortunately, it's not Martial Uncle Xie Jianqing's tail needle. I can still try. Qing Lu put the poison needle into his bag and smiled faintly. These tail needles were also great magic weapons for the people of the Biling tribe. If used properly, it would not be a problem to save one's life. If used properly, it could kill people without leaving a trace. Hearing this, Xing Tian frowned. It was not that he did not believe in Qing Lu's methods, but He Ren's identity was not ordinary. If anything happened, it would not be good. If He Ren died in the hands of Xiaoyang, it would be fine. However, if he did not die with his help, he would more or less have to bear some responsibility. Thinking of this, Xing Tian's brows furrowed even more. Or, you two don't believe in my methods? But it doesn't matter. Master is naturally much more powerful than me. Qing Lu's observation was not bad. He said very indifferently, if they met, they would just help out. If the other party did not dare, then Qing Lu naturally had nothing to say. Life and death were up to fate. It was not easy to find a person in this huge tomb. I believe you, He Rin said. Chapter 2543. When He Rin said this, he seemed to be very helpless, because his current situation was already very bad. If he continued to delay, he didn't know what kind of unforeseen event would happen. It was not an easy task to find Shi Yunfeng. Moreover, dissipating the poison power now was the most important thing. Qing Lu was a rising star of the Confusion Barrier tribe, and also a proud disciple of Shi Yunfeng. Presumably, his attainments in poison were also extraordinary. Qing Lu, on the other hand, smiled warmly and said, "Thank you for your concern. I can only give this poison a try. Whether it succeeds or not will depend on whether your strength is strong enough." As soon as these words came out, Xing Tian frowned a few times. These words were spoken as if they were a joke. How could he be at ease? On the other hand, He Rin seemed to be very free and easy. He looked as if he was treating a dead horse as a living horse. He trusted the person in front of him very much. It's okay. Although I don't come out often and don't have much reputation, I think I'm not an ordinary person since I can be valued by Shi Yunfeng. He Rin smiled calmly. Hearing this, Qing Lu still smiled gently. There were some emotions in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking in his heart. On the contrary, the news of He Rin being attacked in the tomb spread like wildfire and became more and more widespread. When the group of powerful beings caught wind of this news, they were even more infuriated. These two fellas were truly brazen. Even though they knew that there were countless powerful beings here, they still dared to come forth and hunt them down. They were totally disregarding them. Of course, for some top powerful figures, this was also expected. Since this place was already chaotic, it would be strange if the other party didn't take advantage of the chaos to come and cause some trouble. Among them, Zhu Hong was the most emotional. Now he couldn't wait to immediately mobilize all the masters in the tribe to surround and kill the two outsiders who caused trouble. He Kuei's face was calm. It seemed that he wasn't very concerned about such news. Even his junior, He Rin, almost died. Zhu Hong calmed down. Now the important thing is more important. As for the two little guys, wait until the matter here is over. An old man in a scarlet robe said. Zhu Hong glanced at him and lowered her head. Although she felt very wronged, she could only continue to wait. Brother, what do you think is hidden here? It's actually trapping all of us here. Even after racking our brains, we still can't open this door, Heikue asked curiously. The one Heikue asked was an old man in yellow clothes. The yellow-robed old man shook his head. After all, he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. Who could say for sure what secrets were buried inside? However, to be able to gather all the top almighties in the Wansho realm, it was enough to show that the things inside were naturally not ordinary. Don't be in such a hurry, the red-robed elder consoled. Although these words were said lightly, how could it be possible to remain indifferent? They also coveted the things inside. After all, to be able to use such a large amount of resources to protect, it was enough to explain a lot of things. Heikue remained silent and took out a small black box from his bosom. 2 days had passed, and Xiaoyang had completely suppressed his injuries. Moreover, he had recovered by around 70 to 80%. It had to be said that the medicinal effects of the pills refined by the God Emperor were not bad. They could be said to be miraculous. During the 2 days, Princess Mingzhu had been on tenterhooks the entire time. She did not relax at all. She had been protecting Xiaoyang the entire time. Fortunately, everyone's attention was on the God Disaster Mountain Range. It was rather peaceful, and there were no more disturbances. This made them feel much more at ease. Princess Mingzhu only let out a sigh of relief when she saw that Xiaoyang had exited from his cultivation state. As long as he was fine, they could continue to plan in the future. If anything were to happen to Xiaoyang, things would become much more difficult in the future. Has there been any activity in the past few days? Xiaoyang asked. Princess Mingzhu shook her head. She would pay attention to the God Disaster Mountain Range most of the time, but as she did not go to investigate, she knew nothing about it. At the same time, they felt rather regretful. There were probably many more fortuitous encounters in there. It was just a pity that they were forced to retreat because of this incident. It was difficult for them to take part in it. On the other hand, Xiaoyang frowned slightly as he started to plan again. If he retreated just like that, he would more or less feel like he had suffered a loss. If he could take advantage of such a great opportunity to do a few more things, he would be able to make the best use of the situation. Don't think about it. Let's take a break during this time. It won't be too late to plan again once we've recovered our strength, Princess Mingzhu said with some heartache. Ever since Xiaoyang had come here, he had been racking his brains. He was very tired and needed to rest. Xiaoyang smiled calmly and didn't think too much about it. They had indeed done a lot during this time, so there was nothing wrong with resting for a while. Afterwards, Xiaoyang took out the stately painting and released the statue. After seeing the huge statue, Princess Mingzhu frowned again. What's the connection between this statue and the realm of the gods? Xiaoyang asked straightforwardly. Some of the patterns on it were indeed similar to some of the works of the realm of the gods. I'm afraid this is something that happened 100,000 years ago. Regarding these records, I've only seen bits and pieces in ancient books, Princess Mingzhu said with a bitter smile. His words were also very clear. It was impossible to know the origin of the statue and find out what had happened to it. Too much time had passed. Naturally, it wouldn't be that easy to investigate. Moreover, when the realm of the gods was still in the middle world, they were besieged. Hence, it was normal for them to lose some things and many treasures to be lost. Unable to get an answer, Xiaoyang shook his head. At this moment, Princess Mingzhu walked to the front of the statue and threw a punch. Boom! Suddenly, the entire statue seemed to have collapsed. Pieces fell down continuously. Looking at this scene, Xiaoyang couldn't help but be stunned. The opportunity that was snatched in a moment of desperation was destroyed just like that. Of course, Princess Mingzhu wasn't a reckless person. Since she did that, she naturally had her reasons. In the blink of an eye, they felt an extremely dense spiritual energy. Traces of golden light were refracted from the dust and penetrated the darkness. It's really the mysterious yellow jade. Unbelievable. Princess Mingzhu murmured, and her eyes were burning with passion. Chapter 2544. When the dust settled, Xiaoyang also saw the golden jade pendant floating in midair. It emitted countless golden rays, giving people a feeling of sacredness and inviolability. It was as if it was the most supreme existence in the world. The statue had never lost its color, allowing time to baptize it, but it only had a sense of vicissitudes. It was because of the existence of this jade, nourished by spiritual energy. If it was an ordinary person, they might not be able to destroy the statue outside and feel the existence of the mysterious yellow jade. However, Princess Mingzhu was different. She was from the realm of the gods, and she was also a person blessed by the heavens. The mysterious yellow jade was also very close to her, so when they arrived, they already knew. At the beginning, Princess Mingzhu was also a little uncertain, but as the aura released by the mysterious yellow jade increased, she also had an extremely clear perception. Princess Mingzhu smiled. The mysterious yellow jade was recorded in the ancient books, and it was also a rare treasure in the realm of the gods. Even though some of its effects seemed to be of little value, if one understood the principle of a long-term flow of water, one could unleash all of its effects. After looking around and seeing that there were no changes, Princess Mingzhu waved her hand, and the jade pendant, as if it had intelligence, fell into her hand. Caressing the mysterious yellow jade that only existed in the ancient books, Princess Mingzhu's state of mind also became much calmer because of it. It was as if all of the troubles from before were like smoke, disappearing into thin air. Xiaoyang's eyesight was not bad. Although he could not see the specific effects, just based on this feeling, he could determine that this item was definitely not ordinary. Its grade was even above the spiritual grade. There are many secrets in this item. Even the records of it are only a few words. As for how magical it is, we can only know in the endless perception and exploration in the future. Princess Mingzhu said indifferently. Xiaoyang only smiled and nodded. The realm of the gods had experienced too many accidents and changes. Especially when the middle world fell, the number of things lost was even more uncountable. It was normal for some things to break. Many things would also lose some related records because they no longer existed. For them, the harvest from this trip was not bad. Take the mysterious yellow jade, for example. This was originally an item that was lost in the realm of the gods. Back when the realm of the gods was at its peak, it was also considered a top item. Such precious items should have been recorded in the records. However, there were too many unforeseen events, and too much time had passed. Who could say for sure? At this moment, Princess Mingzhu seemed to be completely immersed in the world of the mysterious yellow jade. She felt the many emotions within it, as well as the endless baptism of time. Countless feelings filled his heart, causing him to enter an extremely mysterious state. In the southeast, this place was already in a complete mess. Even if there was news from the central region, their disputes were only because of the instigation of outsiders. However, the lower three divisions had completely lost their ability to control, and the tribes here wanted to become a new tribe to completely unify the southeast and to have a say in the entire Wanshou realm. So what if the truth was revealed? Benefits were what drove them to kill each other. Among them, there were many tribes that emerged one after another, and they were filled with scheming against each other. With the passage of time, the vitality of several tribes was greatly damaged, and they began to withdraw from the stage of struggle. Some even bowed their heads in submission in order to continue to exist. Among them, the Songlang tribe was the wisest. They did not join the battle group and could barely maintain their strength. Of course, this was because they were greatly damaged from the expedition against the Four Realms Alliance, so no one saw them as a strong enemy. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for them to watch the fire burn across the river. However, during this period of time, Yu Xia was having a headache, because Yu Xia was in the central region, and the Green Bull tribe that had fought their way out of the encirclement had begun to set their sights on the Songlang tribe. The pressure they exerted was extremely great. The Songlang tribe could either submit or start a war. Their attitude was extremely tough and unquestionable. Previously, regardless of whether it was Xiaoyang or Yuxia, they had asked him to just watch the fire burn across the river. However, at this moment he could not avoid it. What should he do next? This made Yuxia very angry. The worst thing was that he could not contact Yuxia. Although Yuxia did not fear the Azure Ox tribe at all, the casualties that would occur when the time came would probably be unimaginable. On this day, the problem that Yuxia was worried about was easily solved. This was because a young man with a jade face and white clothes was flying over on a sword. His speed was not very fast, but he appeared to be very confident. Previously, the Central Region had received news that the Four Realms Alliance had sent people to harass them. Who could tolerate such an arrogant person coming here? Moreover, after figuring out the other party's cultivation level, they were all afraid of heights and prepared to kill the jade face and white clothes. How could a second-level martial emperor be worthy of their attention? However, after experts were killed one after another, some people of the same cultivation level did not dare to fight anymore. Even a third-level martial emperor seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow from the jade face and white-clothed swordsman. Bai Jian had already arrived at the beast's realm. Due to the location, his first stop was still the southeast. After receiving this news, Yuxia strictly ordered his tribesmen not to provoke him. Back then, Bai Jian had a breakthrough and killed 10 martial emperors with a single flying sword. This was still fresh in Yuxia's memory. Although this person was dispirited later on, he was now in high spirits. So what if he was a second-level martial emperor? If he did not have enough confidence, how could he have the guts to come here? To be able to become brothers with Xiaoyang, it was impossible for him to be an ordinary person. Bai Jian only cared about moving forward. If someone tried to stop him, he only needed to use his sword. Not long after, Bai Jian saw a very strong man standing in front of him, blocking his way. However, Bai Jian's speed did not slow down at all. It was as if he did not put this obstacle in his eyes at all. When he had just entered the beast's realm, many people had tried to stop him. However, in the end, they had all lost their lives. This indomitable sword momentum was what Bai Jian relied on. The strong man looked at the jade face and white clothes, sword-wielding young man and felt a little more pressure in his heart. It was as if he had seen a great enemy, and his heart was still beating with fear. His opponent's cultivation level was lower, but he seemed to be fearless. Could it be that he had deliberately suppressed his cultivation level and everything was an illusion? However, the strong man was also pushed to the teeth of the storm. He had no choice but to stand out and stop this young man from the Four Realms Alliance. Chapter 25:45. This burly man was the commander of the Green Bull tribe. He wanted to be promoted to one of the 10 great tribes, but without an absolute realm, it was naturally difficult to achieve. However, he still had a chance to unify the southeast and then kill a powerful outsider to establish his power. Even if he was the weakest of the 10 great tribes, there was a world of difference between his status and that of a tribe. Moreover, in this critical period, there was no room for the slightest carelessness. Any slight mistake could change the overall situation. Killing this outsider in front of him was a great opportunity for him to become famous. It was also the first step he needed to take to promote his tribe to a tribe. However, the other party came aggressively and even completely ignored him. This caused him to have many concerns in his heart. Could it be that this person was really a monster who could completely ignore him? Thinking of this, the burly man's heart was beating like a drum. However, he clearly sensed that the other party was a second-level martial emperor. This made him very conflicted, and he did not know how to make a decision. As the saying went, an arrow on the bow had to be shot. No matter how many concerns he had in his heart, he had to bite the bullet. "I'm a 4th-level martial emperor," the burly man shouted with a little guilty conscience. Now, even he himself did not know what he was afraid of. At least, based on what he felt at the moment, he felt that all of this was somewhat unreal. Bai Jian seemed very relaxed. He smiled and said, "If that's the case, then I'll step into the third level and kill you." Hearing this, the burly man's eyes were filled with shock. Breaking through to the next level was as easy as drinking water in his mouth. Wasn't this tone a little too arrogant? Could it be that this person really did not have the slightest bit of fear? Or was it that he was so lucky that he could speak so arrogantly? These things, no matter how one thought about it, made one feel very helpless. It was not that realistic. However, in the next moment, the burly man's expression changed again. This was because he felt that the jade-faced man in white's aura suddenly began to rise. That aura had already reached the third level in the blink of an eye. In just a short moment, he really stepped into the third level, as he said. Wasn't this speed a little too fast? Moreover, this kind of action made it difficult for people to understand what was going on. In the next moment, Bai Jian's hand gently waved, and immediately, several sword intents suddenly pierced out, directly towards the burly man. At this moment, the burly man's heart was filled with despair. He now also understood that he had met a tough nut to crack. His first reaction was to quickly leave this place, but it was already too late. The sword wills pierced through his body and killed him instantly. The burly man's body continuously, Bai Jian did not look, and continued to fly on his sword. It was as if the current him was already unstoppable, and no one could stop him from moving forward. For a moment, the great martial emperor of the Green Bull tribe were trembling with fear. How could they dare to resist such a domineering sword move in the slightest? If he insisted on killing his way in, he would be digging his own grave. What's the tribes of death? So many things happened that they were caught off guard. Right Blind was also watching the battle from afar. When he saw this scene, he was even more horrified. He Blinds, he Lin's king he, was high-spirited and invincible. However, there was one thing that Blind to Blind was sure of. Due to the death of their strongest person, the Green Bull tribe would not dare to disturb the Grey Wolf tribe. Moreover, they might even be attacked by the other tribes because of this unforeseen event. Whoever stood out would be in an extremely dangerous situation once they lost the suppression of absolute strength. Blind to Blind to Blind to Blind's relief. After the crisis was resolved, he naturally did not have to worry so much, and he could live peacefully for a while. However, Blind to Blind to Blind to Blind's heart was still somewhat uncomfortable. This was because he felt that the Four Realms Alliance was truly terrifying. Lin Fan's Lin's breaking through realm with just a few words would probably become a legend in the future. The fair-faced young man in white continued to fly on his sword. No matter what kind of opponent appeared in front of him, he would break through with his sword chi, preventing them from disturbing him at all. This was him. He was incomparably domineering, and no one dared to covet him anymore. Princess Mingzhu was in that mysterious state for a long time. When she opened her eyes again, the mysterious yellow jade seemed to have merged with her. Golden rays of light were constantly refracted from her eyes, and the majestic aura became even denser, as if she was unparalleled. That disdainful attitude of looking down on the world was vividly displayed. Looking at this situation, Xiaoyang was extremely shocked. The mysterious yellow jade brought about the aura of an emperor. Princess Mingzhu raised her eyes and looked around. Looking at the surrounding scenery, the corner of her mouth revealed a trace of a strange smile. It was as if she was examining this world, and this world was filled with evil and disgusting. Her current state was obviously not right. This was also noticed by Xiaoyang. Instantly his eyes were filled with fear. If Princess Mingzhu was really affected by the mysterious yellow jade, she might lose her normal thinking. It could be said that the mysterious yellow jade still contained the consciousness of the ancestors of the divine realm. Once she was possessed, the consequences would be extremely terrifying. Thinking of this, Xiaoyang immediately spread out his consciousness and prepared to investigate. However, just as he released his aura, Princess Mingzhu turned around and looked. Her eyes were filled with majesty. It was as if she was violated. Even if it was just a glance, it was not allowed. Such a terrifying gaze caused Xiaoyang to frown even more. The mysterious yellow jade was indeed a rare treasure. It could even be said to be the most supreme item in the divine realm. However, there were some clues in this. Although it was said that if the ancestors of the divine realm were to possess her, then he would have an even stronger helper. However, in the end, the ancestors were only ancestors. He was a person of the past, and he was already dead. He was not Princess Mingzhu, and he was also not Xiaoyang's friend. If Princess Mingzhu was bewitched as a friend, how could Xiaoyang turn a blind eye? Therefore, no matter what, if there was really a problem, then Xiaoyang still had to take care of it. Princess Mingzhu seemed to have noticed that the attitude of the person beside her was a little different. Instantly, her eyes were filled with anger, as if an emperor was angry. Chapter 2546. The coldness and majesty in her eyes made Xiaoyang extremely uncomfortable. Even when they met for the first time, Princess Mingzhu did not act like that. Xiaoyang wasn't sure if Princess Mingzhu had changed because of the mysterious yellow jade, or if it had happened after she was possessed. So, no matter what, he still had to find out. Even if she pursued the matter in the future, he felt that it was fine. If something happened to Princess Mingzhu in front of him, it would be a huge mistake. Impudent. Faced with such a rude examination, Princess Mingzhu felt extremely displeased in her heart. The aura emitted from her eyes became even more powerful. Her tone was filled with anger. When Xiaoyang heard this, he only laughed coldly. From the majestic tone without any emotion, he was sure that the person talking to him was definitely not Princess Mingzhu. And that was the scariest point. There was indeed something strange in the mysterious yellow jade. Then, I have something even more impudent. I wonder if Senior can accept it, Xiaoyang said with a smile. There was some doubt in her eyes at first. Then it was filled with endless rage. Xiaoyang's consciousness had already charged over and forcefully entered Princess Mingzhu's consciousness sea. It was not easy to enter Princess Mingzhu's consciousness sea. He also faced resistance. In order to not hurt his friend, he silently endured it and allowed himself to be injured. After arriving, Xiaoyang saw the lady in white lying there quietly. She seemed to have fainted. There was some satisfaction on her face, as if she was having a good dream with news. However, the aura in the consciousness sea had some changes. The endless majesty made it hard for people to breathe. Even the lady seemed like an outsider. "Ignorant mortal, how dare you!" A loud roar rang out, filled with endless anger. After seeing the situation clearly, Xiaoyang's lips curled into a cold smile. He did not expect the predecessors of the realm of the gods to use such despicable means. So what if I'm bold? Compared to Senior's shamelessness, it's much better, Xiaoyang mocked. When the old and majestic voice heard that, it was even more furious. It even caused the entire consciousness sea to become agitated. It was as if it was a giant beast that could swallow Xiaoyang's soul at any time. No matter how big the wind and waves became, Xiaoyang remained unfazed, as if Mount Tai was collapsing in front of him. The angrier you were, the more it meant that you were in the wrong. Under such circumstances, there was a possibility of persuading him. If the other party felt that it should be like this, then a confrontation between them would be unavoidable. She is a person of the realm of the gods. It's her honor to sacrifice herself for me today. The old voice replied. Just as the voice finished speaking, another person appeared in the consciousness sea. It was a middle-aged man who looked somewhat similar to the current god emperor. However, he did not have the gentleness and temperament of a god emperor, which made people feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. He only had an awe-inspiring majesty. Xiaoyang laughed when he heard that. This kind of bandit logic was extremely laughable. I am ignorant and inexperienced. I have never heard of such a custom in the realm of the gods, Xiaoyang said coldly. The middle-aged man only snorted coldly. His face was full of displeasure. He was naturally unhappy that some things were exposed. In fact, the middle-aged man also knew that this female junior had great luck. If he could take over her body, his future achievements would be immeasurable. It might even surpass what he had done before. In that case, you are but an outsider. You want to meddle in the internal affairs of the realm of the gods? The middle-aged man scolded sternly. As an outsider, he had such a way of doing things. That was really meddling. At the same time, as an experienced and knowledgeable predecessor, he also knew that this young man was not simple. To be able to withstand those injuries, to come here and say these words calmly, such calmness and strength was already hard to deny. I am indeed an outsider. However, Princess Mingzhu is my friend, Xiaoyang said indifferently. Towards this predecessor of the realm of the gods, Xiaoyang still had some restraining fear in his heart. Actually, it was not impossible for him to fight with him to determine the victor. However, if they fought in this place, then the one who would be hurt in the end would only be Princess Mingzhu, his companion. Therefore, to be able to resolve this matter in a gentler way was the best plan. She is my descendant, my flesh and blood. What's wrong with sacrificing herself for me? If not for me, how could she exist? The middle-aged man laughed coldly and asked, listening to such bandit logic and emotionless words. Xiaoyang also felt very helpless. It seemed that these old things had experienced too much time. Some of their feelings and conscience were almost obliterated. Indeed, without Senior there would be no her. Since she already exists, why would Senior personally erase your junior's legacy? Xiaoyang retorted, if he wanted to argue, then Xiaoyang would not feel that he was in the wrong. Moreover, the most important thing now was to protect Princess Mingzhu first. Other things could be discussed in the future. Hearing such words, a trace of doubt flashed across the middle-aged man's eyes, but very soon it became firm. He was the realm of the gods. What he said was the truth, and this junior's words were merely fallacious logic and heresy. There was no need to care about it at all. If he took it seriously, that would be losing his face. Ignorant junior, don't talk nonsense. On account of the fact that you are concerned about this girl, this emperor will not bicker with you. But if you dare to talk nonsense again, don't blame me for not giving you any face. The middle-aged man seemed to have lost his patience and rebuked angrily. Towards these words, the middle-aged man indeed felt somewhat uncomfortable. If he continued to argue, the displeasure in his heart would probably increase more and more. Therefore, might as well chase him out. As long as he could carry out the possession perfectly, then the matters in the future would naturally become simple. And at this critical juncture, he still had to endure a little more. Being able to shout him back with words, that was naturally the best result. Otherwise, even if it was a battle, he would not be afraid at all. His divine soul could exist for hundreds of thousands of years. Could it be that he would still be afraid of a junior? Xiaoyang took a look at the girl who had already fallen asleep and shook his head helplessly. The other party's attitude was very resolute. Wanting to explain things clearly like this was also virtually an impossible thing. Then this junior will have to ask for Senior's brilliant moves. Xiaoyang suddenly became very gentle. There was also some helplessness in his smile. Chapter 2547. Hearing those words and such an attitude, the middle-aged man was unable to restrain his anger. This little guy is really arrogant. Does he think he's invincible? Thinking about that, the anger in his heart was hard to contain. Since you're looking for death, don't blame me for being merciless, the middle-aged man said. His expression became furious and murderous. Facing a little guy who was going to destroy his plan of reincarnation, he naturally had to get rid of him as soon as possible. If he were to continue causing trouble, it would be hard to predict what kind of changes the situation would take. Hence, if he were to get rid of him now, all these problems would no longer exist. In the next moment, as the middle-aged man waved his sleeve, His sea of consciousness became turbulent and countless amounts of energy gathered. Xiaoyang also felt the repulsive energy. If he didn't leave, he would be attacked by Princess Mingzhu's sea of consciousness. As a genius, Princess Mingzhu's cultivation was even more terrifying. Her soul wasn't weak either. Once she started attacking, he wouldn't be in a good condition. However, Xiaoyang had no way out. Since he chose to come here, he naturally had to take care of this matter. He couldn't just let it continue to develop. At the same time, Xiaoyang also discovered something strange. That was, no matter how turbulent the situation was, the place where Princess Mingzhu was sleeping was completely calm and tranquil. It was obvious that the sage from the realm of the gods used some methods to make her sleep, creating great conditions. With that, it would be much easier to carry out the reincarnation. Thinking about that, Xiaoyang had a plan in his heart. In the next moment, he charged over. As long as he woke Princess Mingzhu up, everything would be much easier. If Princess Mingzhu wanted to sacrifice herself for her ancestor after she woke up, Xiaoyang would respect her thoughts and actions and fulfill her wish. However, with such a despicable method, he couldn't just sit by and watch. Since he was going to take care of this matter, he naturally had to take care of it to the end. He couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. How dare you! The middle-aged man saw that, and he was instantly furious. He wasn't sure if this junior had the consciousness to sacrifice herself. Hence, he used a great method to make her sleep and dissipate unknowingly. This way, he would be able to carry out a perfect possession. If the younger generation were to be awakened, it would be troublesome. Following the middle-aged man's furious roar, countless astral winds and attacks shot toward Xiaoyang. In the face of those vicious attacks, Xiaoyang directly used his spirit to resist. Even if he launched a counterattack now, it wouldn't be of much use. Therefore, he might as well do more things. They had to do their best to protect Princess Mingzhu, allowing the countless attacks to land on his body. Xiaoyang did not even let out a groan as he continued to move forward. Seeing that the distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer, the anger on the middle-aged man's face grew. Why was this person so ignorant of the situation? Why did he have to be like this? This was indeed difficult to understand. What could be changed by doing this? In the next moment, Xiaoyang had already rushed in front of Princess Mingzhu. He placed a hand on her forehead and used his soul power to wake her up. "Rise!" Xiaoyang shouted as he began to do it in an orderly manner. His back was still being attacked, but this was no longer important. As long as he could wake up his companion, it was worth it. Furthermore, Xiaoyang's spirit was extraordinarily strong. This bit of injury was nothing to him. All of a sudden, the sea of consciousness, which had already formed a storm, suddenly began to calm down. The sleeping woman suddenly opened her eyes. Princess Mingzhu woke up, and what entered her eyes was a man with a gentle smile on his face. He placed a finger on her forehead. Although she had fallen into a deep sleep earlier, when she woke up, a lot of information had been gathered, and she understood the ins and outs of this matter. That senior did not succeed in his possession, so the control of the sea of consciousness and the body was still in her hands. Seeing that Princess Mingzhu had woken up, Xiaoyang smiled in satisfaction and took a few steps back. Princess Mingzhu also stood up. She looked at the middle-aged man and bowed with sincerity. She said, "Junior Mingzhu greets Senior." Her etiquette was thorough and impeccable. The middle-aged man was relieved when he saw that. At the same time, he smiled in satisfaction. Since the junior was so thorough with her etiquette, it meant that she knew what to do. "Chase this outsider out first," the middle-aged man ordered arrogantly. Princess Mingzhu turned around and looked at Xiaoyang. She said, "Go out first. I'll deal with this." Xiaoyang frowned slightly when he heard that. He was rather worried about Princess Mingzhu's current state. The middle-aged man was pleased with himself. He never thought that the little girl would go through so much trouble and even be willing to injure her soul to wake up, only to receive a cold shoulder in the end. seeing that his junior was so enlightened. The middle-aged man's mood became a lot better. Princess Mingzhu smiled when she saw that Xiaoyang was hesitating. Don't worry. Since I've woken up, I'll naturally deal with it. Xiaoyang was still indifferent, but he could read some other information from the other party's clear and resolute eyes. Princess Mingzhu was such a prideful person. How could she be willing to be possessed by a senior? If that was the case, what was the point of her cultivation? Is there really no problem? Xiaoyang was still worried. If Princess Mingzhu couldn't handle it, they could join hands. So what if it was a senior from the realm of the gods? They might not be weaker than the other party in a battle of divine souls. Princess Mingzhu smiled and nodded. She said, "If I can't even handle such a small matter, how can I return to the realm of the gods?" Such a determined and serious tone made Xiaoyang feel at ease. Indeed, if she couldn't even do it on her home ground, she might be a little weak. At the end of the day, this was their family matter. It would be problematic for Xiaoyang to continue interfering. "If there's an accident, ask me to take action," Xiaoyang said and turned to leave. The middle-aged man smiled even more proudly when he saw that the outsider had left. It was as if his plan to possess Princess Mingzhu was already set in stone. There was no difficulty to speak of. "I wonder if the senior has any unfinished wishes. I'm willing to help." The middle-aged man's face changed immediately. Chapter 2548. Between her words, there was something amiss. This caused the middle-aged man's expression to change drastically. Previously, this junior still had a respectful and reverent appearance. But now, her attitude changed a little too quickly. Thus, it made people a little suspicious. What was going on? "What are you saying?" The middle-aged man frowned. The benevolent expression that he revealed with great difficulty earlier had already disappeared without a trace. The voices of doubt increased. Princess Mingzhu was stunned for a moment. She was also a little suspicious. Could it be that there was a problem with her ability to express herself, so this senior could not understand the meaning behind it? A senior is a senior after all. You are the past and I am the future. When Princess Mingzhu said this, her attitude became a lot more resolute again as she looked straight at him. Once these words came out, the middle-aged man was instantly angered to the point where he had nowhere to vent. The meaning behind these words was also very obvious. This junior would not be like Xiao by Rabbit, obediently allowing him to possess her body. The reason why Princess Mingzhu was respectful and reverent before was completely out of respect for a senior. Since the other party did not respect her words, then naturally there was no need to talk about reciprocity. If she offered her body, she would be able to give the god realm a better future. To Princess Mingzhu, this was a complete fallacy. Otherwise, how could the god realm have fallen from the 3,000 middle worlds back then? And today's return was also entirely because of the efforts of several generations of people. The great situation only appeared under the cooperation of the vertical and horizontal. After Xiaoyang withdrew from Princess Mingzhu's sea of consciousness, his face instantly became much paler. His divine soul more or less suffered some injuries, but fortunately it was not very serious. He only needed to recuperate for a while. As for Princess Mingzhu's current situation, he was not worried at all. This woman was arrogant and knew the pros and cons of this. Naturally, she would not foolishly offer up her body, and since she decided to face this matter alone, it meant that she had confidence. Therefore, Xiaoyang could withdraw without worry. If there was no one guarding outside, once another unforeseen event happened, then they would all be at a disadvantage. Although most people were attracted to God Tribulation Mountain Range to search for opportunities, if they were unlucky, even if it was a secluded place, they would be easily discovered. Therefore, it was better to play it safe. Xiaoyang was actually a little depressed. He didn't think that the predecessors of the God realm would actually have such dirty thoughts. It would be understandable if he used possession on some juniors who were at the end of their ropes. However, this was the first time he had seen such a thing. Furthermore, Princess Mingju's talent wasn't bad either. In time, she would definitely become the pillar of the god realm. Moreover, the era had changed, and the current divine world was no longer the divine world of the past. No matter how selfish a person was, there was still a limit. Who would have thought that he would encounter such a thing after making such a trip to the myriad beast realm? This was truly unexpected. However, things had already come to an end, and there was no need to think too much about it. He only needed to wait for the results to appear. As such, Xiaoyang focused more on the Shinnong mountain range. Even though he knew that there were powerful enemies waiting for him there, he was still unwilling to miss this great opportunity. Moreover, their current condition was more or less recovered. It was still possible for them to stir up some more trouble. However, for this trip, they definitely needed to think carefully. They couldn't act willfully anymore. Previously, they were almost caught by Xing Tian. This was where they made a mistake. This was like a wake-up call for them. They definitely couldn't be careless. Otherwise, they would definitely suffer great loss because of this. However, without being able to investigate the situation, even if they were to make arrangements now, they probably wouldn't know where to start. As for Blindswa, there was no reply until now. They didn't know what was going on. If it wasn't for the imprint that Xiaoyang left in his consciousness, it wouldn't be strange if he died in that chaotic situation. As long as Blindswa was still alive, it was enough. After a few hours, Princess Mingzhu finally regained her senses. She looked at the world and laughed bitterly. Seems like that senior is still unwilling to give up, Xiaoyang teased. Princess Mingzhu nodded. Because that senior wanted to possess her from the beginning. Because they couldn't reach an agreement, they could only start a war. It was a matter of course for the junior to sacrifice herself for the senior. In Princess Mingzhu's opinion, this was a fallacy. Therefore, when she started the war, she was fearless and had no psychological burden. After wiping the blood from the corner of her mouth, Princess Mingzhu smiled and said, "But now the mysterious yellow jade belongs to me completely." Previously, Princess Mingzhu still had many doubts in her heart. However, they were all cleared up now. Back then, the loss of the mysterious yellow jade was caused by this ancestor. He didn't want to leave the 3,000 middle world. However, because his body was dying, he used a secret technique to seal himself in the mysterious yellow jade and waited for an opportunity to possess her. However, he didn't expect them to encounter it like this. Princess Mingzhu didn't show any mercy to this senior, who had a sinister intention. She directly defeated him. Xiaoyang shook his head, helplessly. He really didn't know how to persuade such a troublesome matter. Moreover, with his current status, it would be more or less strange for him to say those words. With the help of the mysterious yellow jade, I'm only a step away from the 5th-level martial emperor, Princess Mingzhu continued. When Xiaoyang heard that, he couldn't help but frown. This was definitely a piece of good news for them. If Princess Mingzhu could really enter the 5th level, although she wouldn't be able to do whatever she wanted in the Wanshou realm, it would be enough to make many people feel threatened. As long as they didn't leave the Wanshou realm, the Almighties wouldn't dare to act rashly. That's great, Xiaoyang said with a smile. Xiaoyang wasn't sure how effective the mysterious yellow jade was. However, from the changes, he could see that this item was very beneficial to cultivation. Thank you very much, Princess Mingzhu said. If Xiaoyang hadn't woken her up in time, Princess Mingzhu would have lost everything in that beautiful dream. In the end, even her body would have been taken away by someone else, and she wouldn't even have noticed. Xiaoyang just waved his hand. They were companions and had gone through thick and thin together. Naturally, he couldn't turn a blind eye to such a matter. Looking at the calmness of the person beside her, Princess Mingzhu felt very at ease. It seemed that it wasn't a bad thing to continue like this. Suddenly, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. Even the surrounding spirit qi became restless. Chapter 2549. Looking at the surrounding rocks rolling down and countless trees snapping, Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu subconsciously looked towards God Disaster Mountain Range. Because the epicenter of the earthquake was God Disaster Mountain Range, they were still thinking about how to continue to gain benefits. But now there was another change. Some of the wild beasts around them also began to become restless, while some small animals directly crawled on the ground, trembling. It was as if this world had encountered a great change, and the wind was rising and clouds were surging, as if the world was about to change. Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu looked at each other, then immediately flew towards God Disaster Mountain Range. They knew that some great change had probably occurred in God Disaster Mountain Range, which was why such a phenomenon had occurred. With such a great commotion, it was either a battle between powerhouses or some great opportunity was about to appear. No matter which premise it was, they could give it a try. They might be able to gain a lot if they tried their luck. Moreover, this was also very tempting. Sometimes they needed this kind of courage to fight to let them go further. As the saying goes, the bold die of overeating, and the timid die of starvation. They were also restraining their auras. Now, because the situation was unclear, it was better to be careful. If an opportunity really appeared, then they could fight with all their might and try once. If they succeeded, then it would be greatly beneficial to them. Otherwise, if they could find a chance to kill some people, it would be a good thing for them. Soon, the two of them landed at the edge of God Disaster Mountain Range. If they continued forward, they might expose themselves. After all, that was the center of the storm. Once they were inside, there would be many things that would be out of their control, and even more situations would appear. That was hard to say. They were all waiting. When the situation was clear, then many things would be easily solved. If they rushed in now, it would only create more situations. They would hide in the dark to plan things and kill their opponents by surprise. This commotion is not small. I wonder what kind of opportunity will appear, Princess Mingzhu said with some anticipation. Now, she was indeed very curious whether this opportunity would allow her to take another step forward. If it could, then the threat of the Wanshou realm would be greatly reduced because of this. There were simply too many things that a supreme expert of a world could influence. Moreover, what they desired the most now was their cultivation level and strength. Xiao Yang also felt that it was a little strange when he sensed the irregular vibrations, because the former was like the appearance of a great opportunity. But now, the chaos and disorder really made it hard for people to be sure of it. Even if experts were fighting, it would be impossible to maintain the vibrations for such a long time. Unless, of course, two boorish men were engaged in a melee. The terrifying force generated from the collision of their bodies was truly unbearable within this perimeter. However, such a possibility was still possible in the myriad beast realm. After all, everyone was a ferocious beast, and their greatest asset was their physical body. However, at the next moment, their thoughts came to an abrupt end as a furious roar was heard. They saw a huge phantom rushing out of the mountain range and appearing in midair. It was a creature that looked like a dragon. Although it had sharp claws, there were no horns on its head. That's not a dragon. Horned dragon! Princess Mingzhu blurted out. Xiao Yang was also slightly startled. He did not expect there to be such a xenogeniac in the Wanshou realm. However, the horned dragon was only a phantom, as if it was condensed from spiritual energy. It did not have a physical body. As it absorbed more spiritual energy, the horned dragon's phantom became more and more real. In a moment, it became lifelike, as if it was real. After seeing the horned dragon, Xiao Yang could not help but gasp. He also thought that the horned dragon was probably the owner of this tomb. For it to be able to possess such a huge tomb and be filled with countless opportunities, it was naturally a powerful being before it. It did not seem to be a problem for it to use some methods to maintain its current state and kill those who disturbed its peace. Looking at the lifelike horned dragon, Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu also began to slowly move forward. Although they could see it clearly from here, if any opportunities were to appear, due to the distance, they would be too far away to help. Since the horned dragon was born, it would be the center of the storm. Only by getting closer could they obtain more opportunities. The horned dragon's aura continued to strengthen. This made Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu feel that they could obtain more benefits. The reason why this beast had appeared was probably to kill those who had disturbed his peace. The reason why it appeared on the mountain range was probably because it was afraid of destroying its home. As expected, not long after, 3 black figures suddenly rushed out and surrounded the horned dragon. Looking at the 3 of them, Xiaoyang's eyebrows furrowed again, because these 3 people were enough to represent the entire Wanshou realm. They were all at the 6th Order Martial King realm, and their strength was profound. They were supreme existences. If the 3 of them fell, the entire Wanshou realm would be shaken. Looking at the 3 almighties, Xiaoyang couldn't help but take a deep breath. With their current abilities, it would not be easy for them to pull off some tricks under the noses of these 3 people. Princess Mingzhu's hand tightened on her sword. Under such circumstances, she was indeed very nervous. The God Disaster Mountain Range was a gathering of powerhouses. There might be even more powerhouses appearing in the future. If they were to act rashly, they would most likely be heavily encircled. If that happened, their situation would become even more difficult. The reason why they were able to cause trouble in the Horned Dragon Tomb was because the powerhouses were scattered all over the place. Then, more and more martial emperors rushed out. They lined up as if they were ready to kill the Horned Dragon. Among them, the weakest was a 4th-level martial emperor. Everyone looked at the Horned Dragon with burning eyes, because all the highlights of the tomb were related to this Horned Dragon. If they could kill it and obtain the opportunities inside, it would be enough for many people to reach the sky in one step and reach a higher realm. Even the old guys could not hold back. Now that they stood out, it was obvious that they wanted to fight for it. Almost all of the experts from the various clans had appeared. Everyone was ready to attack. Obviously, they wanted to kill the Horned Dragon right here and now. Such a scene was magnificent. Even when they invaded other worlds, they had never seen so many powerhouses gathered together. Chapter 2550. Of course, these 3 6th-level martial royal realm experts were the main force in this siege. The man in the black robe was He Kuei. His eyes had become extremely cold. He was also the main person who had analyzed the clues in this tomb. Because the Blackwater tribe was the place with the richest collection of ancient books in the Beast Realm, he also read a lot of books and knew a lot of things. These days he had read countless ancient books, so he deduced that the tomb here belonged to that person. When the shadow of the Horned Dragon appeared, he was even more excited because it also showed that there was no problem with his deduction. Everything was going according to his expectations, which made him feel extremely gratified. Breaking the shackles of the 6th level was in this opportunity. If their cultivation base could take another step forward, then not to mention the small 4 Realms Alliance, even the Enflame world would become insignificant in front of them. They would be able to crush and conquer it. In his eyes there was endless heat. How could he bear to miss such a great opportunity that had appeared in front of him? The man in the red robe was the 6th-level expert, Zhu Guangtu, the 6th-level expert of the Flame Tribe. The reason why the Flame Tribe was now under Zhu Hong's control was that Zhu Guangtu was focused on cultivation and did not want to be disturbed by the mundane world. So he simply delegated power. He also wanted to suppress others, but he had not been able to do so for so many years. This time, if he succeeded, not to mention surpassing the other 2, his own strength would also be greatly improved. Everyone wanted to reap the benefits of this opportunity. However, they were well aware that if the 6th-level expert did not say anything, how could they be qualified to compete? The other person was the Black Dragon Tribe's expert, Xian Jian. Among the 6th-level martial royal realm experts, only Xian Jian was the strongest. This was also publicly acknowledged in the Myriad Beast realm. This time it was also because of his presence that everyone was so confident. Brother Xianjian, the horned dragon's current strength is at least comparable to a 7th level existence. We should be careful. He Kuei took a deep breath and said, Moreover, this was only a shadow. If it was the real body, they would not dare to look at it. He Kuei knew that the horned dragon was only half a step away from that realm when it was alive. The fall of such a powerful existence was due to him going against the heavens, causing him to suffer the wrath of the heavens, causing him to die of depression after suffering heavy injuries. Even his tribe seemed to have been condemned because of that heaven-defying act. After the group of people in the sect died, the younger generation was even more useless. In tens of thousands of years, the tribe ended up being exterminated. Now, the horned dragon was nowhere to be seen in the myriad beast realm. The overlord of that generation, who had brought the Wan-Shou realm to an absolute height, had ended up in such a desolate state. No matter how strong a person was, that was a thing of the past. Time was the most merciless. Hundreds of thousands of years were enough for many things to change. Even the once prosperous horned dragon tribe only existed in the records of ancient books. Even so, He Kuei still felt a little weak as he looked at the horned dragon before him. Even after such a long time had passed, he was still able to preserve such a powerful strength. In that case, how powerful was this senior when he was at his peak? Thinking of this, He Kuei smiled helplessly. I think it's more than that. Xianjian said in a deep voice. As soon as these words came out, the people below the stage were even more shocked. If it was really as Xianjian said, then even if they continued to fight, what was the point of it? What are you afraid of? No matter how strong he is, it's all in the past. Now it's our world. Zhu Guangtu laughed calmly. Xianjian nodded in agreement. The truth was indeed so. No matter how powerful the horned dragon was, it was all in the past. Now, if they joined forces, there was a chance and possibility to kill him. Everything was possible, so there was no need to be too conflicted. Soon, another 3 6th level martial emperors stepped forward and formed the second layer of attack. These 3 people were the top powerhouses of the giant elephant tribe, the wild lion tribe, and the iron eagle tribe. The reason why the top 10 tribes were divided into the upper, middle, and lower tribes was that the strength gap between them was quite huge. Although the top powerhouses of the middle 3 tribes were all 6th level powerhouses, there was still a huge gap between them and the powerhouses of the upper 3 tribes who had ancient bloodlines. In their view, this was also an opportunity to change their fate. If they could get some of the horned dragon's blood essence and use it to change their bloodlines, they might be comparable to the upper 3 tribes. Such a huge and uncertain opportunity made them even more eager to get their hands on it. Everyone knew very well that the majority of this opportunity would be taken away by the powerhouses of the upper 3 tribes, but some leftovers might be enough to make a huge change. So, sometimes there was no harm in trying. Who knows, maybe they would succeed. If you don't fight for it, then there will never be a chance and possibility. Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu were even more stunned. Although they also knew this information, when they saw so many powerhouses gathered together, they were still shocked. It seems that we are a little unwise. Princess Mingzhu said with a helpless smile. With such a terrifying lineup, if they still wanted to do something secretly, they would really be courting death. Xiao Yang smiled indifferently and said, Now is not the time to be anxious. Maybe there will be some changes if we wait. If the horned dragon was really easy to deal with, there wouldn't be so many powerhouses stepping forward. Although Xiao Yang's cultivation realm was not high, he could feel that the horned dragon was very powerful. If they were not careful, these powerhouses might end up in a very miserable state. Moreover, the situation of a battle was always changing. If they waited a little longer, there might be some unexpected situations. Princess Mingzhu nodded silently. Now was not the time to be anxious. She also thought it through. Next, they could only wait and see. If the situation did not allow them to, they could only turn around and leave. It was not ideal to fight a stone with an egg. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, was carefully observing his surroundings. At the same time, He was quickly calculating in his mind. What kind of trump card did he have that he could use? Under what circumstances could he reduce the opponent's number of stage 6 powerhouses by 2? However, just as Xiaoyang was pondering, over a dozen type 5 powerhouses appeared and formed a third wave of attacks. Princess Mingzhu's face turned pale. Were there so many stage 5 powerhouses in the upper 3 tribes and middle 3 tribes? Chapter 2551. There were even some people who had yet to show up. As for the rank 4 experts, there would probably be many of them. If such a powerful lineup really gathered together to attack the Four Realms Alliance, they would probably be defeated like a whirlwind. Previously, she had only heard about these things from Xiaoyang. She felt that it was more or less exaggerated. However, after seeing some things with their own eyes, they were very shocked. Even the pressure from the words was far less than what they felt from seeing it with their own eyes. Now, Princess Mingzhu also realized how important this trip was. If they were still preparing for the battle in their own world, they would feel that their defenses were perfect and that the other party would not be able to break through. However, when the other party's mighty figure moved out, their defenses would be vulnerable in the face of absolute strength. Thinking of this, they felt a lingering fear. At the same time, this made Princess Mingzhu feel even more pressured. If they could not contain these experts in the Beast Realm, they would probably only need to send out 1/3 of their experts to destroy the Four Realms Alliance. Thinking of this, the corners of Princess Mingzhu's mouth twitched. In such a situation, it seemed that it was almost impossible to break out of this situation. Xiaoyang silently took out the last poisonous stinger. This was Xie Jianqing's tail needle. It could be said to be a trump card. His gaze swept past Xianjian and the others. It was not easy for a 5th-order martial emperor to kill a 6th-order almighty with just a stinger. Therefore, he had to make some preparations. Since there were many things that could not be controlled in the future, then when he made his first move, he had to make sure the other party lost a type 6 powerhouse. Only in this way could he maximize everything. After seeing some things, his plan naturally had to be more accurate and fatal. Because he knew how strong his opponent was, he naturally had to be more careful in dealing with them. At this time, the battle in the sky had also begun. Xianjian, He Kuangtu, and Zhu Kuangtu directly launched their attacks. Their best moves were easy to grasp. In the face of such a strong opponent, how could they dare to relax in the slightest? He would definitely use his strongest attack. The Horned Dragon completely ignored the attacks of the 3 Class 6 experts. It allowed them to attack as they pleased, but it did not dodge at all. Instead, it launched an attack. The Horned Dragon was like a machine. It didn't know pain and only cared about killing. After a few exchanges, the Horned Dragon was completely unscathed, but the 3 mighty figures were having headaches. Although they were not injured, they definitely did not gain any benefits. Brother Xianjian, if you continue to hide it, I'm afraid we can go back and sleep. Zhu Kuangtu said with some dissatisfaction. Although their attacks looked fierce, they did not bring out their true strength. Zhu Kuangtu knew that this was their fighting style from 1,000 years ago. How could he not have made any progress in the past 1,000 years? Xianjian, on the other hand, acted as if he didn't hear anything and continued to examine the Horned Dragon. Everyone, let's attack together. Don't conserve your strength for the later fights. Otherwise, if we can't kill the Horned Dragon, it'll be useless no matter how many plans we have. He Kuei also stood out and said. For a moment, many people looked at each other. He Kuei could be said to be the calmest, and his analysis of the situation was very accurate. In the next moment, Xianjian roared angrily and punched out. Immediately, an extremely tyrannical force was directly punched out. Under the punch, the Horned Dragon was forced to take a few steps back. With Xianjian's punch, everyone knew that since this top mighty figure had used his full strength, how could there be any possibility of them holding back? After all, if they wanted to kill the Horned Dragon, they needed to show their strength together. If they did not do their best, any carelessness might cause them to fail at the last minute. For a moment, each of them used their special skills and constantly bombarded the horned dragon. Faced with such a fierce attack, the horned dragon seemed to be in pain. It roared continuously, and the attacks it displayed were even more powerful. The entire God Disaster Mountain range was filled with a violent aura. This was caused by the aftermath of the battle. Some of the weaker martial emperors, after showing themselves and feeling the pressure, even ran away pathetically. They did not dare to stay any longer, afraid that they would be affected and lose their lives. The speed at which they all ran away was extremely fast. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the explosive power was. Looking at the seemingly hearty battle in the sky, Princess Mingzhu also sucked in a cold breath. Although the opportunity was right in front of them, it was still unattainable. Wanting to snatch something from the hands of these guys was like a fool's dream. It was almost an impossible task. Xiao Yang did not seem to be interested in the battle in the sky. Instead, he continued to refine the tail needle in his hand. Now that he wanted to turn it into a killing weapon, he needed to put in more effort and methods. Even if there was the slightest flaw, it could cause all his efforts to go to waste. After seeing how powerful the horned dragon was, Xiao Yang felt a lot of pressure in his heart. This was related to the survival of his world. How could he relax? Moreover, the horned dragon was very powerful. This was a great opportunity to kill his opponent. It could be said that this was his only chance. Even if the powerhouses were gathered, an opportunity might appear. When these mighty figures returned and were in their peak condition, although there was a possibility of defeating them one by one, the main point was to be able to fight with them. This was also why Xiao Yang started from the southeast after coming to the Beast Realm. The lower three divisions were the weakest, and it was the easiest to provoke conflicts. As for the Bewilderment tribe, it was because Xiao Yang had spent too much time playing with poison. It was enough for him to use his experience and talent to crush them. In front of the other tribes, he and Princess Mingzhu really did not have the ability to challenge them head-on. It could be said that it was because of this opportunity in the central region that the Beast Realm had changed. If things remained the same, no matter how many ideas you had, you would probably be in an awkward situation where you could not cook without rice. In a short period of time, the giant elephant tribe's rank 6 mighty figure was swallowed by the horned dragon in one gulp. Not even his bones were left. Chapter 2552. After the horned dragon swallowed the rank 6 powerhouse, it quickly charged towards the others, appearing incomparably domineering. Everyone's expression changed drastically when they saw this. Could it be that this beast was so powerful? Moreover, after the Almighty from the giant elephant tribe was swallowed, there seemed to be no signs of struggle. Clearly he had lost his life. However, the leader, Xianjian, did not show any emotion. His attacks were still fierce without any pause. In Xianjian's view, this fight for the opportunity was one's own life and death. If you were not capable enough and lost your life, then there was nothing to be done. Moreover, their attacks could not be stopped. Once the horned dragon was given a chance to breathe, they might have to start all over again. He Kuei was also filled with grief and indignation. But when he thought of the thing hidden in the horned dragon's body, he directly suppressed these thoughts. As long as they could defeat the horned dragon, so what if they had to pay a price? Now was not the time to be soft-hearted. Princess Mingzhu was even more dumbfounded. A rank 6 powerhouse was gone just like that? She did not even dare to believe that everything she saw was real. However, this made her understand that if they wanted to kill the horned dragon, then the powerhouses of the Wanshou realm would have to pay a huge price. Now, she also understood why Xiao Yang did not directly leave. He must have expected such a change. If they could grasp it well, then they might really be able to benefit from it. Suddenly, Princess Mingzhu saw He Ren and Xing Tian standing together. The two of them did not join the battle, but stood to the side with Zhu Hong and Shi Yinfeng. It seemed that they were injured, or perhaps they were guarding against some people with ill intentions, so they stayed there. This horned dragon is so ferocious, it's really frightening, Shi Yinfeng said with a sigh. Although Xing Tian and He Rin did not speak, they knew in their hearts that this opportunity was filled with countless dangers. Many successes and reputations were built on countless bones and blood. How could it be possible to obtain something without paying a price for it? Zhu Hong, on the other hand, remained silent. He would occasionally glance at He Ren and then look at Shi Yinfeng. They were both poisoned by the black stinger, so why was there such a huge difference between them? Or was it that Shi Yunfeng's poison skills were not as good as his disciples? If this continues, I really don't know what will happen, Shi Yinfeng said with a bitter smile. The reason why Shi Yinfeng didn't participate in the battle was because his poison had no effect on the horned dragon. Outside of poison, Shi Yunfeng's ability could only be described as weak. Xing Tian's eyes kept darting around. He believed that Xiao Yang would definitely make a move in such a chaotic situation. As long as they could find his location, with so many experts present, he would definitely fall into a situation where he could not escape even if he had wings. Getting rid of this hidden danger as soon as possible was also what Xing Tian wanted. Although he admired such an opponent, respect came from going all out, not going easy on him. In the blink of an eye, the horned dragon's attacks became ferocious once more. Even the scissors were struck by its tail and were sent flying. At the same time, many experts were hit by the attack and were forced to retreat. Most of them were severely injured. This beast's time is up. Zhu Hong snorted and said. Shi Yinfeng was a little confused. The horned dragon's performance was incomparably fierce. How could its time be up all of a sudden? For a moment, he really couldn't figure out what was going on. The horned dragon is just having a momentary recovery of consciousness. That's why it's so fierce. He Rin explained patiently. Shi Yinfeng understood. When he nodded, he saw several fifth-level martial emperors falling down. Obviously, their vitality had been cut off, and there was no way for them to survive. This kind of final counterattack was the most terrifying. The strength of the attack was even more terrifying. At this moment, He Kuang and Zhu Kuangtu both revealed their true forms. They wanted to stop the horned dragon's madness, but they were sent flying and couldn't stop it. However, everyone seemed to be in a frenzy. They didn't care about how fierce the horned dragon was. They revealed their true forms and rushed forward dauntlessly. Now was the best time to kill the horned dragon. Even if they had to pay a high price, they had to kill it. If the stalemate continued, it would be the most disadvantageous for them. In the next moment, the mysterious scissors revealed its true form. It was a huge mysterious dragon. It rushed into the sky and collided with the horned dragon. It was as if it wanted to compete with the horned dragon. One by one, the powerful figures rushed forward dauntlessly. The more critical the situation was, the more focused Xing Tian's attention was, because that person was very good at picking the right time. Now was the best time to attack. Previously, Xing Tian could still use his divine sense to investigate. However, as the aftermath of the battle became more and more violent, he could only give up. If he forced himself to do so, it would only bring him one result. That was his divine sense would be damaged. Ferocious beasts were already weak in divine sense. If it was damaged again, it would be difficult for it to recover. He Rin didn't let down his guard either. His eyes moved very quickly. Although the battle in the sky was very eye-catching, he didn't dare to look at it. After all, it was very important to guard against the person who was doing things in the dark. Now that all the powerful figures were dealing with the horned dragon, it was difficult to guard their backs. If the other party appeared and attacked, that poisonous stinger would probably kill a powerful figure. Under such a situation, it could be said to be very chaotic. What they needed to do was to suppress the situation and prevent any accidents from happening. Even if they were killed by the horned dragon, they wouldn't feel anything. However, if they were killed by an outsider's plot, it would be very sullen. This battle had been going on for a long time, and all the powerful figures were more or less injured. And this Chiu massacre had already reached its final stage. The mysterious scissors spat out a ray of mysterious light and directly penetrated the horned dragon's head. Zhu Kuangtu's wings flapped. Countless flames wrapped around the horned dragon, constantly burning and wearing down his power. When the powerful figures saw the two's actions, they all understood that this was a fatal attack. Almost all of them began to summon their last bit of strength, preparing to kill the horned dragon. Countless bursts of power continued to erupt, bombarding the horned dragon. The horned dragon was also erupting with its last bit of strength, as if it was making a final struggle. Its body kept twisting. Under the impact, even the powerful figures were sent flying, unable to resist. The horned dragon's power was also rapidly diminishing. Chapter 2553. Although the horned dragon was powerful, it was only a remnant of its strength in the face of all the mighty figures in the beast realm. It could not reverse the situation and dominate the world. After receiving a fatal blow, it seemed to have no strength to struggle anymore. It hung in the air and looked like it was about to fall. However, it was still the horned dragon. Even though it was at the end of its life, its power was still very terrifying. The cultivators present, who coveted it, did not dare to act rashly. Xian Jian took a deep breath. He was also trying his best to suppress his injuries and harmonize his aura. In Xian Jian's opinion, the horned dragon could only fight like a trapped beast. As long as they waited a little longer, its power would naturally dissipate and it would no longer be a threat to them. If they acted rashly, they might suffer a fatal blow. Moreover, the biggest problem had been solved. On the contrary, Xian Jian did not dare to underestimate the people around him. Although Xian Jian was the strongest in the beast realm and his cultivation was unfathomable, he was attacked by the horned dragon and was now seriously injured. If He Kuei and Zhu Kuangtu joined forces, he would not be able to gain an advantage. Moreover, this was the territory of the Scorching Flame tribe. If he wanted to obtain more benefits, he naturally had to be more cautious and not act rashly. The current situation was very delicate. A small change could cause a huge uproar. Therefore, under such circumstances, Xian Jian could only continue to hold on. He Kuei and Zhu Kuangtu also very tacitly stopped fighting. They had a tacit understanding of the current situation. Because of the fear between them, no one dared to attack again. They were all waiting for an opportunity to appear so that they could obtain the greatest benefits. As for the mighty figures of the Wild Lion tribe and the Iron Eagle tribe, they were also seriously injured and almost did not have the confidence to continue fighting. Therefore, they also consciously took a step back to avoid being affected. If an opportunity fell in front of them, they would naturally not hesitate to attack as long as there was a chance. However, in such a stalemate, whoever stood out would probably be attacked by the crowd. Therefore, it was important to wait and see. Xing Tian, on the other hand, was very anxious because the horned dragon's ending was already within his expectations. However, that outsider had yet to make a move. What exactly was going on? It could be said that this was the best opportunity for him to make a move. Would the other party continue to endure like this? Although Xing Tian could understand, he still felt aggrieved. He wanted to break out of this state as well. But if the other party did not make a move, it would be useless no matter how many plans he had. Instead, it was the opportunity that would appear after the horned dragon's death that made him very excited. If the other party still didn't make a move, would he have to continue waiting? This question made Xing Tian feel even more conflicted. He had always been relatively calm, but this time he was very anxious. He Rin was also ready to go. He didn't know what would happen next, so he had to rush up and try his luck. Shi Yinfeng, on the other hand, was relatively calm because he could clearly see that this opportunity was a contest between the upper 3 divisions. The things he obtained from the tomb were already enough. Therefore, to be able to get a share of the opportunities would be a great opportunity. Therefore, some things could not be forced. If one schemed too much and his strength did not match it, it would only bring him a lot of trouble. Xiaoyang was also ready. He had injected some of his poison into the tail needle in his hand, making it even more terrifying. Even a 6th-level martial emperor would lose a layer of skin if he was hit, even if he did not die. At the same time, his gaze was also rapidly searching for the most suitable person to strike this time. After all, this was a killing blow. If he could cause the Wanshou realm to lose a Type 6 powerhouse, it would be a huge gain for him. At the same time, Xiaoyang was also paying attention to the horned dragon. Although he did not make a move, it was not bad to be able to snatch some opportunities along the way. For cultivators, the more opportunities, the better. No one would complain about having more of them. However, no matter how one looked at it, it would not be an easy task to achieve his goal under such circumstances. Therefore, Xiaoyang was also having a headache. He did not know what to do. As the saying goes, everything will be fine when it comes to it. Why should he worry so much now? However, his other hand began to stir in the dark. Layers upon layers of space throbbed, like ripples, quietly spreading out. "Do you need me to cooperate with a slash?" Princess Mingzhu asked in a low voice. Xiaoyang shook his head and said, "Once you make a move, I'm afraid you'll be noticed." Princess Mingzhu could only nod silently when she heard that. Since that was the case, she could only continue to wait. Currently, the God Tribulation Mountain Range was a gathering of powerful cultivators. Although everyone's attention was on the horned dragon, Xingtian, Heirin, and the others did not join the battle. Naturally, their goal was clear. However, Xiaoyang's move could be done silently. Who knows, he might actually be able to create some opportunities for them. If Princess Mingzhu were to accumulate power for a sword strike, it was likely that the power that would be released at that time would be easily detected by others. The tail needle also emitted a chill under the sun. Suddenly, something strange happened. The horned dragon seemed to have realized that these onlookers were waiting for it to die, and it was powerless to change the situation. Therefore, the horned dragon chose a path, which was to release the last of its power and drag everyone down with it. In an instant, the horned dragon exploded. Countless terrifying forces spread out like a violent storm. Seeing the horned dragon acting like a madman, all the cultivators present were shocked. Although they were mentally prepared, the sudden turn of events still surprised them. For a time, the ferocious beasts' bodies kept glowing. They all wanted to protect themselves in this chaos. Even a 6th-level powerhouse did not dare to be careless, let alone the others. For a time, there were constant groans. Some people with heavy injuries and weak cultivations were even sent flying. They could not maintain their state of hovering in the air. It was very tragic. This storm was the horned dragon's final release. Even Xianjian, Heikue, and the others were on guard. At this moment, Xiaoyang, who was hiding in the dark, also made a move. Chapter 2554. Although Xiaoyang would inevitably be affected by the force of the self-destruction of the horned dragon, it was also because of the chaotic situation that he was able to take advantage of the situation. Sometimes, you can only know what the result will be after you try it out. Moreover, Xiaoyang had been accumulating his power for a long time. This time, he was almost certain that he would succeed. How could there be any mistakes? At the same time, Princess Mingzhu unsheathed her sword. She also began accumulating her power. Since Xiaoyang had already made his move, there was no harm in exposing herself. Moreover, they wanted to fight for the next opportunity. The more chaotic the situation was, the more chances they would have. If they were lucky enough to kill a few more powerful beings, it would be worth it. In fact, they didn't have much hope for this opportunity from the very beginning. Their goal was very clear. They wanted to kill as many powerful beings as possible. Sometimes it was not bad to take a step back. If they could succeed, so what if they turned around and left? Therefore, what she was doing now was only part of her plan. Xiao Yang's gaze was fixed on the center. Since he had already made his move, there was no turning back. He could no longer control the tail needle. All he could do now was to see what kind of treasure the horned dragon left behind after its death. If there was a chance, he would definitely fight for it. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Yang saw a few pearls floating in the air after the horned dragon had completely split open. Every pearl was emitting a mysterious yellow light. It was extremely dazzling. That's the inner core left behind by the horned dragon. No wonder a shadow could be so powerful. I see. Xiao Yang muttered to himself. He frowned. If that was the inner core left behind by the horned dragon, then the power it contained was naturally immeasurable. Even though it had been worn down over the past hundreds of thousands of years, how could something left behind by a powerful being be simple? For a moment, Xiao Yang could not help but subconsciously hold his breath. This was because it would not be an easy task to snatch the Niden. Moreover, the storm was not over yet. However, Xiao Yang had already made a response. In an instant, he summoned the stately painting. If he could snatch those inner elixirs, it would be of great benefit to their future cultivation. Everything was covered by the storm created by the death of the horned dragon, so no one noticed anything. Xian Jian's gaze became even more sinister. He also saw what was inside. Even Xian Jian became very excited because those Nadins were what he relied on to break through his shackles and advance to the next level. How could he not look forward to this? If he could succeed, then he would be able to obtain even more benefits. At that time, wouldn't a tiny little Yin flame realm be easily captured? He Kuei, as the person who understood the opportunities here the best, had a sharp look in his eyes. The three of them wanted to rely on this to break through their shackles. Now the opportunity had come. However, in the next moment, Xian Jian frowned instead, seeming to be in extreme pain. Everyone was resisting the impact of the storm. At the same time, their attention was attracted by the Nadins, so they did not notice the change in Xian Jian. Xian Jian looked to the side and saw that his neck was pierced by a black poisonous needle. Immediately, his eyes were filled with rage. He did not expect that he would fall into a trap today. Moreover, it was under the condition of revealing his true form. For a moment, Xian Jian did not dare to make a sound. He groaned, pulled out the needle, and kept it in his pocket. Xian Jian's cultivation was so high that he could naturally suppress the poison. However, the sudden feeling of exhaustion and numbness made his eyelids very heavy. In fact, even his own body felt the same way. At that moment, Xian Jian was extremely shocked. He was the strongest person in the beast realm. Today he was attacked and still found it difficult to withstand. Xian Jian did not dare to make a sound. If this situation was known to others, who knew what would happen, Xian Jian silently scanned the surroundings. Seeing that no one knew anything, he secretly sighed in relief. However, at the same time, he was extremely furious. That outsider who had always been hiding in the dark was truly hateful. Every time he attacked, it was extremely fatal. Moreover, he seemed to be able to succeed every time. What made Xian Jian the most furious was that he had left behind 4 level 5 powerhouses to defend. However, the outsider still succeeded. Could it be that the few of them existed in name only? The more he thought about it, the angrier Xian Jian became. As his emotions fluctuated, he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. The poison spread wildly again, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. After Xiao Yang saw that his attack had succeeded, he revealed a knowing smile. Xian Jian did not dare to make a sound because he was afraid of the situation. This gave Xiao Yang a great opportunity. If Xian Jian went to find Shi Yinfeng for help at this time, he might be able to recover his cultivation in a few days. However, if he forced himself to hold on now, then even if his injuries were healed in the future, there would be hidden dangers. At the very beginning, Xiao Yang did not think of killing a level 6 powerhouse. However, based on the current situation, it was indeed possible. When he felt that the sword momentum beside him was becoming stronger, The smile on Xiao Yang's face became wider. What would happen if Princess Mingzhu slashed out with her sword? It was also because the sword momentum was getting stronger that a gaze looked over at this moment. Hey, Rin noticed the change in this place. They're hiding there. Hey, Rin suddenly shouted. As soon as he said that, Shi Yunfeng and Zhu Hong immediately rushed over without hesitation. Although they were also very envious of that opportunity, hunting external enemies was what they needed to do. Moreover, Shi Yunfeng and Zhu Hong's temperament was relatively stable. Moreover, there was a deep hatred between them and Xiaoyang, so they were so active and anxious. Xing Tian glanced at it and frowned, looking very hesitant. Now that Xiaoyang and Princess Mingzhu's hiding place had been exposed, he was no longer in the mood to chase after them, because Xing Tian sensed that in the storm there seemed to be something calling out to him, asking him to go over. He Ren looked at Xing Tian in a daze, seeming to be even more confused. What kind of change had happened? Chapter 2555. Azure Sky Sword Rain. Princess Mingzhu let out a low roar. Her sword, which was still accumulating power, slashed down. She didn't slash at Zhu Hong and Shi Yunfeng, but at Zhu Guangtu. Compared to He Kuei, Zhu Guangtu's defense was weaker, and his injuries were more serious. If this attack succeeded, it would be enough to make his injuries even more serious. They were the extra weights on the scale, and the changes they made would cause the scale to tilt. If they could break this seemingly harmonious situation, it would be very beneficial to them. Seeing Shi Yunfeng and Zhu Hong rushing over, Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Then, with a flip of his hand, the Thunderfire Divine sword appeared in his hand. These two were rank 5 powerhouses, and were existences that couldn't be underestimated. 10,000 poison, thunder, dragon roar. Xiaoyang growled and slashed out with his sword. Immediately, a huge thunder dragon roared, circled, and rushed toward the two with bared fangs and brandished claws. Zhu Hong still braced herself to attack, but Shi Yunfeng's expression had some subtle changes, because he sensed that the thunder dragon's power was indeed a little weaker. There seemed to be some special power contained within it. The thunder dragon has hidden poison power. Brother Zhu, don't be careless. Shi Yunfeng's heart also rose with an uneasy thought and immediately shouted. At this moment, Shi Yunfeng understood. Why did his senior brother lose so quickly? Even if the opponent's realm was lower than his, he couldn't compete with him. It was because the opponent's attainment in poison power was far superior to his senior brother's. As everyone knew, the biggest reliance of the Confusion tribe was poison power. If they didn't have an advantage in this aspect, their fighting strength was really not enough. In Shi Yunfeng's opinion, his attainment in poison power was far inferior to that young man. Xiaoyang smiled mysteriously, as if after that slash, he didn't think about what would happen next. It was as if that slash was enough to decide the battle. On the contrary, this deliberately mystifying act made Shi Yunfeng and Zhu Hong feel a chill in their hearts. What was this person planning? What kind of plan did he have? All of this caused the two of them to feel a little terrified, and they didn't dare to be careless. Each of them displayed their best moves, wanting to block this attack. At the same time, the 7 monster cores suddenly shot out in different directions, as if they were fleeing. After this scene appeared, each and every one of them scrambled to be the first to chase after it. Obviously, they wanted to get their hands on those Nadens. Although many of them didn't know what the core was used for, the fact that it was the core left behind by the horned dragon was enough to explain many of its effects. Moreover, even the strongest fighting force of the upper 3 divisions had joined the battle. This was enough to show how precious the battle was. At this moment, Xing Tian also rushed over without hesitation. Obviously, he wanted to fight for the Naiden. As for the things that he had arranged for him before, it was as if he had completely forgotten about them. Xing Tian had already lost his rationality due to the impulsiveness in his heart. All he knew was that he wanted to obtain this opportunity. even though the elders would naturally reward him if they had more. However, how many opportunities could there be? Plus, it was left behind by the horned dragon. Seeing this, He Rin didn't look at Xiaoyang at all. Instead, he also rushed into the battle, wanting to fight for it. Since Xing Tian didn't follow the rules, why should he follow them? With such a huge opportunity, if he could get a share of it, he would naturally benefit immensely. He Kuei was the first to make a move. With his ability, he directly grabbed one of the cores. Xian Jian, on the other hand, was stunned. He also wanted to fight for it, but because his body was paralyzed, he couldn't move at all. Therefore, he could only watch as the opportunity passed him by. At the same time, Zhu Kuangtu wasn't having a good time either. The sudden rain of swords made his injuries even more serious. By the time he had withstood the rain of swords, the inner core had already brushed past him. However, was Zhu Kuangtu someone who gave up so easily? He turned around and chased after it. In other words, after the horned dragon died, their alliance had ended. As for how many opportunities they could get, that would depend on their own abilities to fight for. Xiaoyang suddenly stretched out his hand, and an inner core fell into his hand. He used the art of great teleportation to forcefully distort space and send an inner core into his hand. At the same time, the mountain river map also unfolded and blocked another inner core. After Zhu Hong and Shi Yunfeng destroyed the lightning dragon, they were greeted with another rain of swords. Princess Mingzhu stood with her sword and looked at the two of them coldly. Since Xiaoyang had the means to fight for it, she only needed to block these troubles. Sure enough, the mountain river map also took in another inner core. There were a total of 7 inner cores. Now, 3 of them had fallen into the hands of others. If he didn't speed up, he might not get anything. Thinking of this, Xian Jian endured the corrosion of the poison and turned around to rush in another direction. "Let's go!" Xiaoyang shouted and quickly chased in the direction where Xian Jian disappeared. Xian Jian was a 6th-level powerhouse and was recognized as the strongest powerhouse in the beast realm. If they could kill him now, it would be a heavy blow to the entire beast realm. As for the remaining inner cores, they could fight for them. If they stayed in this troublesome place, it would be the scariest thing. At that time, as outsiders and invaders, they would most likely be targeted as well. Therefore, it was better to leave as soon as possible. Moreover, if they could kill Xianjian and take another inner core, it would be a profitable business. Zhu Hong and Shi Yunfeng looked at each other. It seemed that their previous agreement had fallen apart. Should they continue to chase? Seeing that her own team was having a hard time chasing, Zhu Hong gritted her teeth and turned to support Zhu Kuangtu. Right now, the most important thing for them was to be able to put this opportunity into their pockets. As for the enemy they hated to the bone, they could only kill him later. Although they were somewhat unwilling, they had to do so. Shi Yunfeng smiled bitterly and shook his head. He didn't dare to act rashly. If it was someone else, Shi Yunfeng would be very confident. However, the other party's poison was more powerful than his. If they chased after him, they would be courting death. At this moment, Xing Tian, who was rushing halfway, was hit in the chest by an inner core. The inner core didn't penetrate his body and seemed to be embedded in it. Suddenly, he was stunned and fell directly into the God Disaster mountain range. For a time, many people swarmed over. Chapter 2556. Now that Xing Tian's fate was unknown, many people felt that the Niden had become an ownerless item, so they naturally wanted to fight for it. However, some of the almighties of the Black Dragon tribe were not to be trifled with. Seeing this, they directly rushed down and killed anyone who dared to go in the direction of Xing Tian's fall. They were very cruel and merciless. This was the myriad beast realm. In front of benefits, they would fight to the death. So what if they were outsiders? As long as they were not in their sight, they could ignore them as if they did not exist at all. After He Kuei obtained one, he had already turned his gaze to the other side, because in his opinion, if he could obtain one more, his cultivation might be able to improve a little. At that time, it was possible for him to defeat the mysterious scissors. For tens of thousands of years, their Blackwater tribe had been second, which made Hei very unconvinced. Now that an opportunity had appeared, and he had made countless preparations, how could he let it slip away from his hands like this? This was also a great opportunity to turn things around, so he still had to fight for it again. Rin also met up with him now. With just a glance, the two already knew each other's thoughts. With a smile, they rushed to the other side. The top experts of the various tribes, and some tribes were unwilling to fall behind and began to fight and kill for the Niden. The Almighty of the Iron Eagle tribe was lucky to obtain one, but it soon attracted the siege of countless experts. Even with the help of his companions, it was very miserable and almost impossible to control it in his own hands. It could even be said that this Niden with a great opportunity was like a hot potato. Even if you obtained it, whether you could hold it in your own hands was still a huge problem. Not everyone could hold on to it just because they were lucky enough to obtain it. The entire God Tribulation mountain range could be said to have begun to kill each other because of these Nadins. Blood continued to sprinkle down, and many experts were destined to be buried in the God Tribulation mountain range. Every time a great opportunity appeared, there would be a storm of blood in the myriad beast realm. However, after every storm of blood, the strength of the myriad beast realm did not decline because of it. Instead, it became a lot stronger because of it. This was the principle of natural selection and survival of the fittest. This point could be said to be vividly displayed in the myriad beast realm. The mysterious scissors suddenly sped up and grabbed a Niden in his hand. Instantly, his heart became even more excited. Although he was severely injured, he had achieved his goal and was once again in control of everything. As long as he could return and consume this Niden, his strength would definitely skyrocket. At that time, it would not be a problem for his strength to rise to the next level. However, the smile on Xian Jian's face soon disappeared. He turned around and saw the two people from the outside world charging toward him with swords in their hands. Xian Jian still maintained its original appearance, glaring angrily. Even though his injuries were very serious, and because of the poison he felt extremely uncomfortable. However, now was not the time to think about that. Moreover, these two juniors had come for him. Their goal was naturally very clear. He wanted to take advantage of his current state to take his life. Xiao Yang and Princess Mingzhu stopped 10 feet away from the mysterious scissors. After all, the mysterious scissors was the strongest in the Wanshou realm. If they pushed too hard and the mysterious scissors did something for a long time, they would not be able to bear it. After all, how could such an expert not have his own trump cards and confidence? Therefore, the slightest bit of carelessness could drag oneself into an irrecoverable situation. What a powerful kid! He is only a level 4 martial king, but he is able to be so opportunistic. Xian Jian said somewhat angrily. Similarly, they also respected the strong. 2 level 4 martial kings could stir up a storm in the myriad beast realm. This courage was enough to shock others. Therefore, Xian Jian also knew that the other party was probably taking a risk because they had no choice. The strength of the 4-realm alliance was probably very weak. Therefore, they took a risk and used offense as a defense. Xiao Yang smiled indifferently. He was not prepared to refute such words. However, his gaze did not shift away. At the same time, he was also sensing the other party's condition. The strongest person in the myriad beast realm was here. If he did not have 90% confidence, he would be digging his own grave. Therefore, it was better to calm down. It seems that you still have some self-awareness. Although this noble one was injured by the horned dragon and was then ambushed by your venomous scorpion stinger, and is now in a terrible state, you still don't dare to act rashly. It seems that you know how powerful I am. Xian Jian continued. Princess Mingzhu snorted. The sword in her hand continued to emit sword light. Princess Mingzhu was very calm now, because she knew that if she acted rashly, she might end up making a fool of herself. She had been watching the battle just now. Naturally, she knew how terrifying this old man's strength was. Their pursuit this time was more or less based on luck. They did not know how much of Xianjian's strength he could still use. They would only know after they came into contact with him. Since you are so afraid, why bother to pursue me? Or do you like to find trouble for yourselves? Xianjian suddenly shouted angrily and questioned. Of course, Xianjian knew what the two little fellows were thinking. However, he did not want to act now. It was naturally a good thing that he could scare them away. If they were really stubborn and thought that they were weak because they were heavily injured, then it would be their time of death. Xianjian's current condition was very bad. However, he suppressed 2 levels. Moreover, he had seen a lot. How could it be so simple? Xiao Yang's eyebrows also furrowed. He was still somewhat unsure of the current situation. With their current condition, it was indeed very difficult to challenge someone of a higher level. After all, that was a top expert who suppressed them by 2 levels. Fortunately, they had some foreshadowing previously. This allowed them to see an opportunity for victory. But with such a small chance, whether or not he could win it over to his own hands became a huge problem. Of course, as long as they could drag it out and prevent Xianjian from suppressing the poison, it would be enough to kill him. However, that would require a very long time. When the curtains fell on that opportunity, they would be heavily surrounded again. At the same time, 2 black dragons charged from behind. Chapter 25:57. There were 2 black dragons, one old and one young. Both of them had injuries on their bodies, but they could not be ignored. Both of them were in the 5th rank. When Xianxiu and Xingfeng saw the 2 outsiders chasing after their ancestor, they quickly chased after them. Although both of them were tempted by the opportunity, they knew the severity of the situation. If anything happened to their ancestor, their position as the leader of the Black Dragon tribe would be in danger. In fact, if the other tribes were to start a war, they might end up in an even more miserable state. Seeing Xianxiu and Xingfeng arrive, Xianjian let out a sigh of relief. At least, he did not have to continue fighting. If the battle continued to be in a stalemate, the poison in his body would spread even more violently once he made a move. At that time, he might really fall into the trap of these 2 little fellows and die here. However, the Black Dragon tribe was not a good-for-nothing. There were still some smart people who could see the situation clearly and knew what to do. Princess Mingzhu's brows were tightly knitted together. They still had a chance to win if they were worth it. However, it seemed that it was impossible to kill Xianjian now. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was an extravagant hope. Moreover, they didn't have much of a chance of winning against the 2-stage 5 Almighties. It would seem that your luck isn't very good. It would seem that the final victor is still me. As Xianjian said that, he started to laugh out loud again. With the arrival of his tribe members, Xianjian put down his worries completely. Previously, he was in a situation where he had to fight to the death. However, he only needed to continue watching the show now. Sometimes, changes in the political situation were so sudden that it caught people off guard. Xiao Yang shrugged with a smile and said, "It's still unknown who will be the next winner." Xianjian laughed again when he heard that. He felt that it was ridiculous. It seemed that the young man did not understand the situation. Even if the 2 of you are top experts and can kill a 5th rank expert when you join forces. However, if you can join forces, then the 2 of them can do the same. Princess Mingzhu frowned when she saw that Xiaoyang did not seem to have any intention of retreating. Her gaze landed on Xianjian. Since they wanted to kill Profound Scissors, there was no way out. When Xianjian heard this, he laughed out loud. He now somewhat admired the courage of these 2 little fellows. In such a situation, they still dared to speak like this? Could it be that they really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Or could it be that they were powerful enough to ignore the suppression of cultivation levels? Thinking about this, Xianjian helplessly shook his head. These words could only be used to fool children. In that case, I would like to see where your confidence comes from. Xian Jian had an interested appearance, as he said. With the passage of time, the experts of the profound dragon tribe would most likely arrive one after another. At that time, no matter how strong the two of them were, it would be difficult for them to break out of the encirclement. They might even lose their lives here. Xian Jian felt that he could accept this. After all, since the two of them came to the Wanshou realm, they had done too many things that had shaken the entire Wanshou realm. It was better to get rid of such people as soon as possible. They might not be certain that they could kill him and would continue to hide. This kind of opponent who was hidden in the dark was also very scary, just like a poisonous snake. You would never know when they would attack. Once you make a move, you will definitely have to pay a heavy price. Therefore, to be able to kill them was a fortunate thing. Xian Qiu and Xing Feng also made their preparations. However, they did not act rashly. After all, the development of this matter was still a mystery. No one could see through it. "Take them down," Xian Jian said with a smile. His words were said lightly. At that moment, Xian Qiu and Xing Feng's aura suddenly exploded. The powerful pressure caused the surrounding living beings to fall into a state of panic once more, causing them to flee in all directions. In fact, some of the sturdy trees were even directly turned into fine powder. From this, it could be seen how angry the two of them were. The aura they released was already so terrifying. After feeling the pressure, Xiaoyang frowned. He turned around and pointed his sword at the two of them. If they wanted to risk everything to kill Xian Jian, it would be difficult for them to succeed. By then their backs would be completely exposed. Even if they were lucky enough to kill him, they might lose their lives too. Therefore, Xian Qiu and Xing Feng, who had rushed over, became a hurdle that they could not avoid. If they wanted to kill Xian Jian, they had to kill the two of them first. The sudden turn of events also made Xiaoyang feel a great pressure. This time, it was indeed a risky move. Princess Mingzhu stood with her sword in hand. She started to plan, quickly in her heart. How to win next had become a big problem in their hearts. Xian Jian's mocking smile became even wider. He even showed his human form. Clearly, in his eyes, victory was already in his grasp, and there was no need to worry about anything. "You go kill Xian Jian. I will stop the two of them," Xiaoyang said softly. The moment these words came out, Princess Mingzhu's brows could not help but twitch. Such an idea was a little too crazy. The two of them might not be able to kill Xian Jian even if they joined hands, let alone facing him alone now. Moreover, Xiaoyang had to face 2 rank 5 powerhouses alone. How long could he last? Such a risky move would only put the two of them in a dead end. Thinking like this, Princess Mingzhu had even more thoughts in her heart. But in the end, she could only suppress it quickly. Since Xiaoyang made such a decision, she could only take the risk and try. Really interesting. Do you think that you are not dying fast enough? Xian Jian said with a laugh. Now, Xian Jian felt that this young man was indeed very arrogant, so arrogant to the extent of being conceited. As such, it made him even more curious. What kind of person was he, to actually be so rampant? As long as Xian Jian can't suppress the poison and injuries, we still have a chance. Otherwise, when he recovers, I'm afraid we won't have any way anymore, Xiaoyang said softly. It could be said that Xian Jian was in his weakest state now. If they could not kill him now, they would have an even bigger headache in the future. Chapter 2558. Princess Mingzhu nodded her head firmly when she heard this. Since Xiaoyang had already said so, it would not be appropriate for her to continue being hesitant. The logic was indeed like that. Wanting her to kill Xian Jian by herself was indeed a difficult task. However, if she didn't try, she would never be able to defeat him. Moreover, Princess Mingzhu trusted Xiaoyang very much. She felt that there must be something strange and infinite possibilities in his words. Looking at Xian Jian's current state, it was indeed very bad. Moreover, he still had a Niden in his hand. If he let it slip away and refine the Niden, How terrifying would his strength become? He might even break through the shackles and catch up to the next level. At that time, the difference in strength between them would be too great. In that case, how could they kill him? The situation of the Four Realms Alliance would probably become worse because of this. Even the disaster of destruction could be foreseen. What they needed to do now was to suppress all of this and seize a trace of opportunity from the extremely slim possibility. At the next moment, Princess Mingzhu no longer hesitated and directly slashed at Xian Jian with her sword without hesitation. Now, Xian Jian was not just injured. He was also hit by the tail needle. That was the key to victory by killing him. If the other party did not have the energy to suppress the poison, when the poison completely erupted, it would be the time for Xian Jian to die. Therefore, there was a trace of possibility that needed to be pursued. Xian Jian saw that the little girl really attacked, and her sword was even sharper. Thinking of how Zhu Guangtu was beaten to a pulp before, he did not dare to underestimate her. He immediately waved his hand, and countless mysterious lights were constantly emitted, attacking the sword chi. Shattering sounds continued to ring out as the power of the two of them was completely depleted by the mutual destruction of each other. At this moment, Xian Jian had no choice but to straighten his face again. Although Xian Jian seemed to have casually attacked and had many scruples, it was not considered to be his full strength. However, this woman was actually able to completely offset it. From this, it could be seen how terrifying her ability was. She is indeed not an ordinary stage 4 master. This strength is no different from a stage 5 master. Xian Jian could not help but sigh and murmured. This made Xian Jian think of Xing Tian from his own clan. They were the top geniuses of their own world. The strength and courage they possessed were extraordinary existences. This also made Xian Jian think of himself. Wasn't he the same back then? However, he couldn't help but wonder when the speed of his breakthrough had started to slow down. Perhaps there were many reasons, but none of them were excuses. In the blink of an eye, Xian Jian returned to his original form. He looked at Princess Mingzhu with fear. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes. This was because killing such a gifted genius was also a very satisfying thing. Princess Mingzhu's face was as cold as ice in the face of the mysterious scissor suppression, and her aura was not weak at all. It was as if he was excited to fight against such a strong opponent. If she could succeed in this battle, then she would go even further. This was a great opportunity for him to sharpen his cultivation. Xian Qiu and Xing Feng saw that the woman had already made her move. They were also a little anxious, but they did not act rashly. This was because the young man they were facing had many strange techniques. He was also extraordinary in the use of poison. If they were not careful, they could be poisoned. Hence, under such circumstances, they did not dare to be careless. However, this stalemate was not a good thing. Although Xiaoyang was fighting against two people, he looked very relaxed and was not in a hurry to act. It was as if everything was under his control and within his expectations. Actually, Xiaoyang was very anxious in his heart, but he could not show it. If the other party saw through everything, then it would be a hopeless situation. Now that he was acting pretentious, the other party would be wary and not dare to act rashly. It would be a good thing if he could buy some time. Moreover, his thoughts were completely focused on the mysterious scissors. If the opportunity to kill him appeared, then Xiaoyang would not hesitate to act. Even if he had to pay a painful price, he would kill him. However, Xian Jian also had a lot on his mind. He suppressed the explosion of the poison while deftly dissolving the attacks. He appeared to be very leisurely. Xian Jian was an almighty who had lived for tens of thousands of years. The current situation was very dangerous for him, but it was not impossible for him to deal with it. What are you two idiots standing there for? Attack! Xian Jian saw this and scolded. In the next moment, Xian Qiu and Xing Feng did not dare to hesitate any longer. They immediately charged towards Xiaoyang. Hearing this, Xiao Yang's heart calmed down quite a bit. He knew that Xian Jian must be anxious. If it weren't for the fact that his injuries were serious, why would he be anxious? Therefore, continuing to fight was the right thing to do. If the mysterious scissors hadn't inadvertently revealed some information, Xiaoyang would have started to think of a way to leave this place after a while of stalemate. After all, since his opponent did not waver and could not be killed, there was no need to continue the fight. However, he saw a sliver of opportunity, and he could not let it slip away from his hands. Seeing the two fifth-level Almighties charging towards him, Xiaoyang hissed coldly. He swung the heavenly sword in his hand, and countless bolts of lightning and fire surged out towards the two of them. Though the two Almighties were injured in the battle against the horned dragon, they could still unleash 80% of their abilities. Therefore, they were not to be underestimated. They turned a blind eye to these sword chis, allowing them to slash at their armor. Sparks constantly burst forth, but no signs of injury could be seen. A beast's defense was already terrifying. On top of that, the serpent was covered in a layer of armor. It was not easy to break through its defense. Xian Xiao and Xing Feng had also revealed their original forms. Their way of fighting became more unrestrained. At once, Xiaoyang felt a great amount of pressure. It wouldn't be easy to win such a bitter battle. However, if Xiaoyang wanted to stall the two of them and prevent them from interfering, then he had to stop them and prevent them from breaking through his defense line. 7 steps of the barbarian god. Xiaoyang let out a low roar, and his body instantly became extremely fast. The bolts of lightning around him became even more overbearing. He did not dare to hide anything. He had to give it his all and fight to the death. Chapter 2559. God Tribulation Mountain Range. As the ownership of the Naiden became clear, some battles were still going on. At the same time, many experts lost their lives in this battle. It could be said that almost every place had turned scarlet. The smell of blood was everywhere, but it did not make them feel disgusted. Instead, it made them more excited. It was as if these were stimulants, making them very violent. Although some experts of the Black Dragon tribe were ready to make a move, they did not dare to make a move. After all, once the battle started, the situation would become uncontrollable. Moreover, their supreme expert, Xian Jian, was not present, which also caused them to lose the confidence to start the battle. Zhu Guangtu also did not disappoint. He obtained a Naiden and returned. Although he was seriously injured, he could still continue to fight. Moreover, this was the territory of the Scorching Flame tribe. They had the geographical advantage. If they wanted to make a move, they could do so at any time. However, the 3 major tribes would not easily make a move because once they started a war, the entire beast realm would fall into chaos. They had a tacit understanding with each other and could only watch anxiously. This was very uncomfortable for the Black Dragon tribe. Now that the old ancestor's life was unknown, although 2 Almighties followed him, they were not very clear about the situation. Of course, what gave them a bigger headache was that Xingtian fell into the tomb after being hit by the Naiden. Several of their Almighties had gone to search, but Xingtian seemed to have disappeared into thin air. They could not find any trace of him at all. This point, on the contrary, made people very anxious and helpless. Therefore, their eyes also fell on the last Naiden. Now that the Naiden had fallen into the hands of the Wild Lion tribe, the battle had not stopped. Brother He Kue, now that you have the Naiden, I think you don't need to continue to fight with us. Zhu Guangtu took the lead and spoke with a smile. He Kue frowned slightly. Naturally, the more Naiden one had, the better. How could he not fight for it? But now, Zhu Guangtu's tone was obviously a bit threatening. Patriarch Zhu has at least one, but our mysterious dragon tribe still hasn't harvested a single one, a middle-aged man joked. He Kue and Zhu Guangtu glared at him. Although they were dissatisfied, they did not flare up. Brother Xian Ye's words are a bit irrelevant. Xingtian got one, and Brother Xian Jian is also chasing after one. Aren't you trying to fool us by saying that there is no harvest? Zhu Guangtu said with dissatisfaction. Xianya's strength was not weak either, being a Tier 6 powerhouse. Xianya laughed bitterly and helplessly. This was a situation that could not be seen or touched. How could he be sure? Or is it that the profound dragon tribe is so overbearing that they're not satisfied after taking two? He Kuei sneered. As soon as these words came out, the expressions of He Kuang and Zhu Guangtu changed. They stared directly at Xianya. As a result, Xianya's frown deepened. Now, the attitude of the two was very clear. If Xianya went to fight for it again, it was likely that the two great tribes would directly attack. Right now, Xianya could be said to be suffering in silence. After all, the other two did not fall into his hands. If this stalemate continued, it would not be a good thing. Therefore, he still wanted to fight for the ownership of the last one. If Brother Xianya is so greedy, don't blame us for falling out with you. He Kuei suddenly said coldly. As soon as these words came out, Xianya also felt a great pressure. It seemed that it was inevitable that they would fall out with each other today. Xianya did not flare up, but smiled and nodded. If an opportunity presented itself, he would not hesitate to take action and seize it for himself. How could he miss such a precious opportunity? As for the last inner core, how do we divide it? He Kuei asked in a low voice. Zhu Guangtu frowned. There were too many wolves and too little meat now. There was only one inner core here. How could they divide it? For the time being, we'll split it in half. If we can find the outsider, then we'll discuss how to divide it. Zhu Guangtu made a prompt decision. Now they had to stop the mysterious dragon tribe from getting the third inner core, so they had to compromise. Moreover, the two outsiders might die in the hands of the mysterious scissors. At that time, the mysterious dragon tribe would have two more inner cores. It would be difficult for them to compete with the mysterious dragon tribe in the future. They would need to join forces. He Kuei smiled bitterly when he heard this. It seems that this is the only way. Let's keep the inner core first, and then chase after them. This time we can't let the mysterious dragon tribe take the big picture. He Kuei echoed. Originally, He Kuei thought that he would be the biggest winner. However, with the addition of the two outsiders, his thoughts had to change again. It was very uncomfortable. No problem, Zhu Guangtu said very cooperatively. They were well aware of the current interests. Some compromises were still necessary. Xianya, do you really want to start a war? Suddenly, Zhu Guangtu roared. Xianya saw that the situation was not right and took the initiative to attack. Obviously, he wanted to take the inner core in the hands of the wild lion tribe. Seeing that Xianya did not reply and only rushed to fight for the inner core, He Kuei and Zhu Guangtu could not continue to tolerate it and directly rushed to kill. Since you don't care about morality, then we can only start a war. Xian Xiu and Xing Feng saw that Xiao Yang's aura had suddenly become so strong, and they could not help but be a little absent-minded. Could it be that this guy was really a monster? In such a state he could still run rampant? At least in terms of aura, they felt that the other party's strength was not weaker than theirs. Under such circumstances, Xian Xiu and Xing Feng did not dare to be careless and became even more cautious. If these two people were not outstanding, how could they easily come to the myriad beast realm to cause trouble? Everything was because he had the confidence to do so. Without confidence, they naturally could not act recklessly. Thunder fire sweep. With a low roar, Xiao Yang's attacks became even fiercer as he charged toward Xing Feng, who was the weaker of the two. Xing Feng saw this and was shocked. At the same time, he snorted coldly and his competitive spirit was aroused. Suddenly, his aura became stronger because of this. My realm is higher than yours. How can I be bullied like this? No matter what, this does not make sense. Xian Xiu did not dare to hesitate. His body swayed and also began to charge. Chapter 2560. Xiao Yang turned a blind eye to Xian Xiu's attacks. But how could he face them head-on? In the next moment, he turned around and appeared in an extremely tricky position. He slashed down with his sword, catching Xing Feng off guard. Xing Feng was not an ordinary person. He was not scared out of his wits by this sudden attack. Instead, he gathered his spirit and suddenly raised his head and spat out a mouthful of air. Mystic light destruction. Instantly, a mystic light shot out from his mouth. It was like a beam of light that shot toward Xiaoyang. It was extremely magnificent and domineering. Mystic light destruction was one of the Xian dragon tribe's ultimate techniques. Once it was used, its destructive power was extremely strong. They did not dare to use it when sparring with their own tribe. This was because if they did not control it well, it could harm their lives. This was a battle of life and death. So Xing Feng had no scruples. As long as he could kill Xiaoyang with this move, the rest would be much easier. Everyone had their own plans. They wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Xing Feng was even a little proud of himself. He felt that his plan was too ingenious. This time he would definitely succeed. Xiaoyang looked at the mystic light that was charging towards him and smiled proudly. Although Xing Tian had calculated this was a flaw that Xiaoyang had purposely revealed. He did not dodge or evade. Instead, he drew a circle in the air with one hand. Seeing the extremely furious Xing Feng, who was going all out, Xiaoyang started to laugh heartily. Sometimes, borrowing the enemy's strength to deal with the enemy was not a bad thing. At this moment, Xing Feng and Xian Qiu were a little depressed. They could not understand this young man's actions. What was he doing? Or was he plotting something greater? Teleportation technique. The mystic light rushed into the ripples, but it disappeared without a trace. Xian Qiu and Xing Feng were both stunned. They really didn't understand what was going on. On the other side, Xian Jian, who was fighting fiercely, suddenly felt an extremely uneasy feeling. He even felt a chill in his heart. Boom! In the next moment, a profound light suddenly surged out from high above in the sky, and it caught Xian Jian off guard while his body was directly smashed into the ground. That magnificent beam of light completely hit the mysterious scissor's body. Suddenly, Xing Feng and Xian Qiu were even more shocked. What was going on? Massacre of the golden light. This was an opportunity created by Xiaoyang. If he missed it, he would lose all his chances. At this moment, Princess Mingzhu didn't care about anything else. She only cared about using her ultimate skill. For a moment, the sky was filled with dazzling golden light. At the border of the central area, a young man with a jade face was in high spirits. All along the way, he rode on his sword and killed all enemies he encountered with a single strike without the slightest hesitation. Because of this, his reputation began to spread throughout the entire myriad beast realm. However, the speed at which it spread was not as fast as the speed at which he advanced. Perhaps it was because many almighties were in the God Calamity mountain range. That was why this young man's journey was so easy. Now, the strongest opponent he encountered was only a 4th level martial emperor. Even with his 3rd level cultivation, he could easily kill him. Everywhere he passed, there would be some ignorant myriad beast realm cultivators who stood out to block his path. In that case, their consequences would be the same as well. Now, Bai Jian's face was also a little anxious because he heard some news a few days ago. After hesitating for a long time, Blind Yu still told Bai Jian where Xiaoyang was. However, Blind Yu was very careful and also told him using the Heart Lake Ripple method. After knowing that his life and death friend might be facing a desperate situation, how could Bai Jian act as if nothing had happened? At least he confirmed the location. That was the central area's God Calamity mountain range. Since there was an opportunity there, he naturally had to join in the fun. However, although Bai Jian was anxious, the speed at which he advanced did not change. This was because he felt that his comprehension of the sword Dao was still a little lacking. If he went too quickly and failed to comprehend the slightest bit, he would probably be unable to be of any help when the time came. He might even become a burden. Therefore, Bai Jian could only hope that his life and death friend could keep a low profile or wait a little longer. As long as he arrived, it would not be too late for them to work together to kill the enemy. Suddenly, several fourth-level Almighties appeared and blocked Bai Jian's path. These people were the Almighties of the Blazing Flame tribe. They were resentful that they could not go to the God Calamity Mountain range to find an opportunity this time. Now, there was an outsider who dared to be so arrogant and bold. How could they tolerate this? Looking at those people, Bai Jian frowned slightly. He could tell at a glance that they were all fourth-level Almighties, as expected of the central area occupied by the upper three tribes. There are so many powerhouses. There are 4 Almighties guarding the border. Bai Jian smiled bitterly in his heart. If it wasn't for that opportunity, the number of Tier 4 powerhouses guarding this place would have increased by a few more. This place was the vital point of the Blazing Flame tribe's border. Once it was breached, the army from the south would be able to march straight in. Therefore, they had to take it seriously. Where did this brat come from? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You're courting death. A hot-tempered Almighty shouted angrily. It was as if they were ready to vent all their anger on this human cultivator. Since you're all 4th-level Almighties, I'll kill you as a 4th-level Almighties. Bai Jian said lightly. Such casual words came out of his mouth as if he was about to break through, causing the Almighties present to laugh out loud. It was simply a joke. In the entire beast realm, even the previous geniuses did not dare to say such arrogant words. These days, they had also received some news. From the way this person came on a sword, they could guess that he was from the 4-Realm Alliance. However, their laughter quickly stopped abruptly because the young man's aura was really rising at an extremely fast speed. The sword aura around him was also increasing because of the increase in his aura. The killing intent contained within was incomparably condensed. After flying for less than 4 miles, the jade-faced young man's cultivation had already reached 4th level. The smiles of the martial emperors froze at this moment. They could not laugh anymore. Could this jade-faced young man really be a monster? This speed of breaking through could be said to be as simple as eating and drinking water. In this trichiliocosm, was there really such an unheard-of thing? Chapter 2561. In the blink of an eye, the few experts of the Scorching Flame tribe who were guarding the border turned into a few cold corpses and fell to the ground. It was also after this battle that the reputation of the jade-faced young man spread. For a moment, even though they had heard of him, after seeing that young man, they did not dare to underestimate him and even avoided him. Of course, there were also some powerhouses who did not know anything who came forward to stop him. But their final outcome was naturally destined. They could not block that jade-faced young man's sword. Even if a god blocked him, he would kill a god. Bai Jian was also thinking of his companion in his heart, hoping that he could continue to endure. It would not be too late to be arrogant after they met up. And now, Bai Jian's attitude could be said to be extremely arrogant. Xiao Yang's current state was not as good as Bai Jian had imagined. Earlier, he had used the greater teleportation to open up the situation. However, he had not been able to block Xian Qiu's attack. His body had been pierced by the Xian light. But the current situation was very advantageous to the two of them. After Xian Jian had eaten the massacre of Golden Light, his life was hanging by a thread. And although Xiaoyang was heavily injured, he did not fall down. He continued to stand with his sword in his hand, looking like a man who could hold back 10,000 men. It was as if as long as he stood there, the two of them could not break through his defense and save Xian Jian. Xian Jian crawled out from the ground. He looked at the girl with hatred and wanted to swallow her whole. But now Xian Jian was in a terrible state. Although he wanted to, he was powerless. Previously, the horned dragon had caused him heavy injuries. Then he was attacked by Xiaoyang and was poisoned deeply. And now he was attacked by 2 ultimate skills. Because of this, his injuries became even more serious. In addition, he could no longer control the poison, and it was wreaking havoc in his body. Even his limbs had become numb. Looking at his blood flowing continuously and unable to be stopped, Xian Jian's heart was filled with despair. At the same time, he was extremely sad. As the strongest in the beast realm, he was about to lose his life because of a little girl. The alliance and scheme of these two people was truly a headache. Even he, the mysterious Scissors, was facing a situation where he was about to fall. When Xian Qiu and Xing Feng saw this, they felt even worse. They really wanted to rush over to change the situation and save the patriarch. However, that young man was like a mountain, separating them from each other. If he didn't kill Xiaoyang, it would be almost impossible for Xingfeng to rescue the patriarch of his clan. Although Xiaoyang was heavily injured, he didn't even look at his wounds. He stood there with his sword in hand, like a horse with a sword in hand. Now that I have achieved my goal, you can give it a try. Let's see if I can kill you. Xiaoyang said as the smile on his face grew wider. He seemed to be very confident. The reason why he was injured just now was because he had to divert his attention to deal with the mysterious Scissors. He was so confident that he looked down on the world. It was also this aura that made Xian Qiu and Xing Feng fearful. They didn't even dare to attack now. They didn't know what kind of fierce attack would land on their patriarch's head instead of the young man. Therefore, in this situation, they didn't know how to continue fighting. It seemed that there was no need for this battle to continue. Princess Mingzhu's condition was very good now. Previously, she couldn't see any hope or opportunity. However, Xiaoyang helped her. Xian Jian was now an arrow at the end of its flight. It wasn't impossible to kill him. As long as they killed the mysterious Scissors, they would be able to extricate themselves. The purpose of this trip could be considered to have been achieved. Princess Mingzhu waved the sword in her hand. Instantly, an even more powerful sword aura started to gather. Since there were endless possibilities now, how could she let it slip away from her hands? Therefore, she had to capture him. Xian Jian's expression became extremely ugly. He even almost cursed out loud. Were those two really idiots? Not to mention that their cultivation was higher than his. It was 2 against 1. How could they be played around by him? This was too much. Until now, Xian Jian was extremely depressed. He felt that this matter was really giving him a headache. Moreover, the other members of the Xian dragon tribe hadn't arrived yet. Could it be that something unexpected had happened? Thinking of this, Xian Jian felt as if he had lost his life. You're not leaving and you're not fighting. What do you want? Xiaoyang said with a smile. Now he was acting as if the outcome was already decided. He looked calm and composed with a hint of playfulness. Xing Feng was young and impetuous. He almost attacked again, but was stopped by Xian Qiu. Being impulsive now wouldn't solve the problem. Now, Xian Qiu was also thinking about what method to use to save the strongest in their tribe. Although Xiaoyang looked like he didn't care, his defense was watertight. They couldn't break through at all. This made Xian Qiu's head hurt. He didn't know how to change the situation. Or are you saying that you're going to watch your strongest lose his life before leaving? Xiaoyang's smile became a lot more eerie. His words were full of provocation. The more he did this, the more Xian Qiu had to be wary. Sometimes a person's attitude would suddenly change. This wasn't without reason and reason. Xian Qiu couldn't help but think about this. If he wasn't careful and fell into the other party's trap, it would be really hard to turn back. Moreover, he had fallen into the trap once before. If he fell into the trap again, it wouldn't make sense. Xiaoyang took a deep breath and waved the sword in his hand. He said, "You're really strange. Are you waiting for my companion to kill him before killing you?" At this time, Xing Feng couldn't take it anymore. With a roar, he charged toward Xiaoyang. Xing Feng's entire body was glowing with a black light. Clearly, he was enraged and wanted to fight to the death with Xiaoyang. Xian Qiu sighed helplessly. He knew that he couldn't stop Xing Feng now. So, he might as well see if this guy could create an opportunity for him to save Xianjian. However, Princess Mingzhu had already raised her sword. The sword aura became even more ferocious and wanted to kill. Chapter 2562. Xiao Yang watched as Xing Feng charged towards him. His heart sank. He did not expect this guy to be such a hothead. If that was the case, this matter would become really difficult to handle. But now that things had come to this, he had to keep up the act. At the very least, he had to wait until the sword landed and kill Xianjian. Xian Qiu had been observing the changes in the scene. When he saw the subtle expression on Xiao Yang's face, his heart sank subconsciously. He felt that he might have been tricked. To put it bluntly, no matter how scheming these two people were, they were only fourth-order martial emperors. This young man was willing to pay any price to kill Xianjian. His motive was obvious. Now he was just putting on an act to make Xianjian fearful. If he did not make a move now, he might really fall into the trap and watch his strongest man lose his life. In the next moment, Xian Qiu did not hesitate. He roared and charged forward. He wanted to save Xianjian before the sword landed. Xian Qiu's sudden change in attack did not restrict his movements. This made Xiao Yang feel even more pressure. If his opponent did not notice anything, how could there be such a drastic change? Therefore, Xian Qiu must have noticed something. That was why he dared to do this. Lightning, prison, fire, kill. Xiao Yang turned his sword and charged toward Xian Qiu. As for Xing Feng, it was fine for him to attack him. If Xian Qiu succeeded, all his efforts would be for naught. There were priorities. There was no time to waste. Feeling the lightning surging around him and invincible sword energy rushing towards him, Xian Qiu understood that he had been overthinking things before, which was why he had been so wary. If he had seen through it earlier, he would not have been stopped by this guy. He was completely scared stiff. Even though Xing Feng did not understand what was going on, he was still stubborn. He was ready to kill. It could be said that in this battle, Xing Feng had been targeted too much. This made him feel extremely displeased. Therefore, he was in a very bad mood right now. He could not wait to kill Xiao Yang right there and then. "You idiot, save him!" Xian Qiu saw the situation and roared in despair. This Xing Feng usually had some brains. So why couldn't he see the situation clearly now? So what if he killed Xiao Yang? He was only a 4th-level martial king. Their strongest man was a 6th-level martial king. How could he not know what to do? Or had he cultivated too much and forgotten to grow a brain? Hearing this, Xing Feng was stunned. He was much more clear-headed now. He immediately stopped and did not dare to charge forward. Xiao Yang let out a low roar. The sword while on the tip of his sword blasted out toward Xian Qiu. He immediately turned and charged toward Xing Feng. "Kill!" Princess Mingzhu growled. Immediately, a huge golden sword aura descended from the sky towards the mysterious scissors. Even though this killing move was completed, Xiao Yang would not allow his companion to be injured in front of him. Therefore, he did not hesitate to step out and protect Xianjian. No. Xian Qiu roared in despair. He wanted to block this move, but Lei Yu was already there. He could not break out of the encirclement. However, Xian Qiu continued to struggle. He used his body to hit Lei Yu. It was as if he wanted to break out of the encirclement. However, just as Lei Yu broke out of the encirclement, the flaming sword aura had already pierced through his body, fist breaking 1,000 refinements. Xiao Yang bellowed as his fist smashed into Xing Feng's head, sending him flying. However, he was also hit by Xing Feng's attack. He flew back a few feet. Fortunately, Princess Mingzhu was not injured. The giant golden sword aura pierced into Xianjian's body inch by inch. His life force was quickly draining away. It was as if he would say goodbye to this world in the next moment. At this moment, Xianjian's heart was filled with despair. He never thought that he would one day die in the hands of a 4th-level cultivator. Princess Mingzhu's eyes were filled with murderous intent and coldness. She raised her sword again. If this could not kill Xianjian, then she did not mind another strike. Why would such a small matter be worth mentioning? Xiao Yang climbed up from the ground. He was already covered in wounds. Even though his entire body was trembling, he forced himself to hold on. Now he finally understood that he had still underestimated their strength. Luckily, he was well prepared this time. Otherwise, he would not have succeeded. When the dust settled, Xianjian's life force was completely gone. There was no way he could survive. At this moment, Xianqiu was about to go crazy. This huge change caused him to feel even more tormented in his heart. Xingfeng stood there in a daze. His eyes were filled with disbelief. That was because he was truly unable to understand what was going on. Who was Xianjian? He was the strongest existence in the Xianjiao tribe. In the entire realm of beasts, he was the strongest. Today, he had fallen at the hands of two Fourth Order Martial King Juniors. What was going on? The two of them came to help. It was supposed to be a simple task, but they failed. At this moment, Xingfeng's mind was filled with many thoughts. All these thoughts made him extremely depressed. Xiao Yang quickly walked over and put the inner elixir into his pouch. Seeing Xiao Yang take the inner elixir, Xianqiu's expression changed. Xianjian was dead and could not be revived. However, the inner elixir might be able to create another 6th-level cultivator. If they let Xiao Yang take it away so easily, then they would suffer a great loss. Xingfeng, kill them! Xianqiu shouted coldly. From the many clues, Xianqiu was sure that they did not have much strength left. And now, it was naturally the best time to kill them all. If they could get the inner elixir back, then the Xianjiao tribe would have a chance to survive. If they did not get anything, then it would be one disaster after another. Just as Xianqiu finished speaking, many powerhouses rushed over. Looking at the sky full of experts, Xiao Yang's eyebrows furrowed together. He did not expect the fight to end so quickly. Now, it seemed like they were in a desperate situation. Princess Mingzhu smiled brightly. She turned a blind eye to the encirclement. She glanced sideways at the man who was still carefully calculating, and the smile on her face deepened.